Chapter 2890 2890 Desiring to Test Battle Prowess. Chapter 2890 2890 Desiring to Test Battle Prowess. 2890 Desiring to Test Battle Prowess. Ling Han's progress was slow, but that depended on whom he was being compared with. How many people were capable of breaking through to the third tier in just a billion years? In terms of natural talent in cultivation, Ling Han admitted that he was not the best, but his opportunities and fortunes had surpassed anyone's. For example, could there be a second person who could accommodate the powers of dimension of the whole Genesis world inside his body? With high natural talent, their progress was slightly faster. However, even when it came to the likes of Lin Yulian, the greatest prodigy of all eternity, wasn't she still stuck at the fourth tier? Moreover, even if they could cross over to the next threshold now, the sixth tier and seventh tier were both huge hurdles, and the time required would be even longer. Furthermore, the seventh tier was the end of the line. If Ling Han could also cross over to the seventh tier, who could rival him? Perhaps he would already be invincible upon reaching the sixth tier. After breaking through to the third tier, heavenly tribulation naturally descended on Ling Han, but he ignored it. This little barrage couldn't even be considered as a massage for him. He guided the constant particles, continuously tempering his body with them from within and strengthening his cultivation of the third tier. Otherwise, having just broken through, it would be impossible to increase his battle prowess. Ling Han took out the single remaining great herb and swallowed it all in a few mouthfuls. He had just broken through and needed the great herb to build his foundations. Even with the help of a great herb, Ling Han still spent another 100 million years to completely stabilize his cultivation level at the third tier. It couldn't be helped. He had too many powers of dimension in his body. A great herb was simply a drop in the bucket. At the same time when he advanced to the third tier, a heavenly venerable seal appeared within his body automatically. It was still incomplete, but the power boost had shockingly reached more than 40 times. If it was complete, how many times could power be enhanced? While stabilizing his cultivation level, Ling Han was also repairing the seal. There were millions and millions of powers of dimension circulating within his body, which actually gave rise to a miraculous effect, nourishing the seal and making it more complete. The power of dimension actually has such an effect. Ling Han was puzzled at first, but then came to a sudden realization. He himself was an equivalent of the Genesis world, so why couldn't he nurture the heavenly venerable seals? A complete third-tier seal was a fourth-grade seal, which would give a boost of power by a total of 64 times. What level has my current battle prowess reached? Ling Han muttered to himself, "Can I surpass the fifth tier?" If it was possible, then he was truly too terrifying. Fifth tier would completely crush fourth tier, and the gap between these two cultivation levels was simply too great. Moreover, Ling Han was now only in the early stage of the third tier. If he possessed the battle prowess of a fifth tier, then that would truly be incredible. Take the Empress, for example. The higher her cultivation level, the weaker her battle prowess. For example, she was currently in the early stage of the third tier, but her battle prowess was only at the peak stage of the third tier, yet to even break through to the fourth tier. It was different with Ling Han. The powers of dimension in his body were all alive, and their growth rate was too terrifying. I really want to find someone to spar with. Ling Han stood up and took a step forward, chasing after the Empress and Hunyo. He had left his power of dimension on the two women. As long as he sensed them, he would be able to find them no matter how far away they were. To his surprise, the two women were no longer on this level. Instead, they had gone further downward again. He didn't stay here for long and followed them underground. Deep underground, he immediately discovered that the fundamental particles here were even denser. The pressure of the dimensional layers seemed to create a huge pressure, causing the fundamental particles to become extremely packed. Here, the collision of fundamental particles was undoubtedly even more intense. Terrifying flames spread everywhere. To say nothing of ninth heaven celestial kings. Even first-tier heavenly venerates didn't dare to force their way in, or else they would be easily incinerated. If there were still a few more dimensions overlapped, would anyone be able to go there? With this thought in mind, Ling Han easily charged through. With his current battle prowess of the 5th tier, this was naturally not a big deal for him. Soon, he broke through the ground layer and entered the 4th dimension. He followed the tracks of the two women. A few days later, his figure landed. The Empress and Hunyo were currently together with many other people. He had no idea what they were talking about, but the atmosphere seemed to be extremely tense. Ling Han immediately said, "Is there going to be a fight? That's great." The Empress couldn't help but be rendered speechless. Why did this guy only think about fighting all day long? Hunyo, on the other hand, said, "No, we were just discussing whether we should enter a cave, not planning to get into a fight." Ling Han couldn't help but feel disappointed. Oh, so there's no fight. He still wanted to fight against a 5th tier in order to test his battle prowess. However, even if there was a conflict here, there wasn't any 5th tier to battle with. Those here were all 4th tiers. With Ling Han's presence, the Empress and Hunyo naturally became bolder. They strongly advocated entering the cave for exploration. Some chose to retreat, while others chose to enter. In the end, they discovered an astonishingly valuable raw stone mine in the cave. Everyone who entered made a fortune. Ling Han had the special ability to see stones, so the three of them naturally earned the most. There were nearly 30 great herbs and 7 heavenly venerable seals, which made the three of them very happy. They left in search of new veins of ore. It was truly interesting. In the past, when Ling Han was still at 2nd tier and did not want to encounter any 5th tier, he would always meet such an elite, or at least meet a descendant of a 5th tier, and both sides would inevitably become enemies. However, now that he wasn't afraid of 5th tier, and was in fact wanting to find one to fight with, all the 5th tier elites seemed to have disappeared in an instant. It wasn't just them. Even their descendants seemed to have all vanished. This made Ling Han extremely depressed, and even his spirit became sluggish. Several years later, they found a new vein of ore. Just as they were mining it, a group of people appeared. "This place belongs to us now. If you don't want to die, scram." There were a total of 12 people in this group, and all of them were heavenly veneratestos. Those who could appear here now were at least 2nd tiers, as it was already impossible for 1st tiers to come here. Hearing this, Ling Han was not angry but delighted instead. He sized up these 12 people, but was greatly disappointed because all these 12 people were actually only at the 2nd tier. He held onto a sliver of hope and said, "Looking at how arrogant all of you are, is there a 5th tier senior backing you?" The 12 people on the other side looked at each other. What was going on? Was this guy so scared that he directly asked about their background? These people laughed loudly. As long as one could become a heavenly venerates, which one wasn't a naturally talented genius, proud to the core, who would be like this, cowering in an instant. "Now that you know we're not to be trifled with, hurry up and scram!" These people all shouted at Ling Han. Ling Han broke into a smile and charged forwards to unleash a barrage of punches and kicks. Pung, pung, pung. What sort of strength did he possess? After a series of chaotic attacks, the 12 people all let out blood-curdling screams. Their limbs were broken, and they were in an extremely miserable state. These people were both shocked and furious. Ling Han laughed out loud and said, "Quickly go back and call your lord over. I'll wait here." Those people were both furious and shocked. Wasn't this guy a coward? Why did he suddenly become so fierce? However, they knew that they were far from being Ling Han's match, so they all fled quickly, afraid that they would be blasted into pieces by Ling Han if they said another word. Watching these 12 people leave, Ling Han rubbed his hands together, appearing rather excited. "Is that necessary?" the Empress asked with a knowing smile. Ling Han smiled and said, I have nothing better to do anyway. Although he said that the anticipation in his eyes had already betrayed him. After almost a day, Ling Han finally saw the return of those 12 people. His gaze swept over them, and he couldn't help but reveal an expression of disappointment, although these 12 people had brought reinforcements consisting of 5 people. These 5 people were all merely 4th tiers. What happened to the 5th tier he was expecting? Chapter 2891 2891 Chapter 2893 White Flames Heavenly Venerate. Chapter 2891 2891 Chapter 2893 White Flames Heavenly Venerate. 2891 Chapter 2893 White Flames Heavenly Venerate. Ling Han glanced around the surroundings. The promised 5th tier was nowhere to be seen, but he did see someone else. The White Flames Heavenly Venerate. Back when Ling Han had obtained the 9th seal in the overlapping space of Realm Battlefield, he had had to escape to Ling City soon after, as the dimension had immediately crumbled. However, he had been quickly surrounded and hunted down by a group of Heavenly Venerates, one of whom had been the White Flames Heavenly Venerate. Back then, Ling Han had simply said one thing, I'll remember you. However, Ling Han had been only at the 1st tier at the time, and couldn't have competed with someone at the 4th tier. Once he had reached the 2nd tier, given the vastness of the world, he had had trouble locating the White Flames Heavenly Venerate. Not to mention, he had had so much going on that he had completely forgotten about the matter. He had never thought that he would bump into the White Flames Heavenly Venerate here. Ling Han couldn't help but smile. I've been waiting for you all. However, all of you are only 4th tiers. That's not nearly enough for me to be satisfied. Insolent boy, remarked an old man in red robes. As a 4th tier, he didn't think a 3rd tier was worth his attention. Naturally, he assumed that Ling Han was simply courting death. Ha! It's little wonder that he would be so brash, seeing as there's a 4th tier backing him up, said another youth in purple robes. While his appearance was young, he had actually lived countless epochs and was also at the 4th tier. As he said that, he looked towards Hunyao. As a Heavenly Venerate of the same level, he could tell the latter's cultivation at a glance. The White Flames Heavenly Venerate was more cautious, however, and said, Everyone, don't underestimate this youngster. He's Ling Han. Ling Han. The rest of the 4th tier Heavenly Venerates revealed a look of surprise. It seemed that they had heard of this name before. The purple-robed 4th tier clasped his hands suddenly and said, Is he that Ling Han? The kid who set a new record in the realm battlefield? At the time, Ling Han had been merely at the 1st tier. Naturally, he seemed like a child to him. The rest of them were equally astonished. It had only been a few million years, and for one to rise from 1st tier to 3rd tier in that short amount of time was simply too shocking of a growth speed. They soon started having second thoughts. Was it worth it to court the resentment of a rising star with limitless potential for the sake of a single vein of ore? Even if they could suppress Ling Han now, what about 10 million or even 100 million years later? Once Ling Han became a 5th tier, wouldn't their positions be completely reversed? Fortunately for them, it was highly difficult for a 4th tier to break through to the 5th tier. Even people like Lin Yulian and Xian Chihu were still stuck in the 4th tier after spending over an epoch trying. This proved how difficult it was to cross that gap. If the 3 greatest prodigies had it so tough, then what more of Ling Han? How could he possibly compare to them? As such, they were simply considering if they should be courteous towards this future powerhouse. They still believed that they had the upper hand and could make the first move. Ling Han, your performance in the realm battlefield was astounding. On account of this, we are willing to let you have this ore vein, said the red-robed 4th tier. He then continued, However, these youngsters were all beaten up by you. We'll let this matter go if you apologize. In his eyes, This was being more than courteous enough towards Ling Han, and it was merely on account of his potential growth. Had it been any other third tier, he would have suppressed them long ago, and would not have been so polite. Ling Han smiled. First off, we found this ore vein to begin with, and we're already in the midst of mining it. What you're doing is robbery. Where did you get the idea that you were letting me have it? Secondly, those people insulted us, so I was simply teaching them a lesson. They're lucky enough I didn't kill them. The purple-robed fourth tier glared. So you don't want to apologize then? Ling Han paid him no heed. He turned to look at the white flames heavenly venerate and said, Little White, I remember I told you before that I'd come find you, didn't I? Little White. The white flames heavenly venerate couldn't help but raise an eyebrow as he felt an urge to fight. However, he knew what a monster Ling Han was, being able to fight third tiers back when he had been at the first tier. Even though it was less likely to be able to fight against someone on a higher level the more one's strength increased, this kid should still be able to fight fourth tiers as a third tier. Hence, he suppressed his impulse as he wasn't entirely sure he could win against Ling Han one-on-one. He needed to get the rest to band together with him at least. The white flame smiled. I've seen plenty of small fry like you. How could I possibly remember everything they say? Previously, he hadn't thought Ling Han would have amounted to anything at all. Little had he expected that Ling Han would have progressed to the third tier and become an existence that could threaten him within a mere few million years. Ling Han laughed. Then let's clear our old debts today. Young man, you are too cocky, scoffed a blue-robed fourth tier. He was completely annoyed by Ling Han's behavior. Within Heavenly Venerable tier, hierarchy was extremely strict. No one would be as arrogant as Ling Han. He was right. As long as one was a Heavenly Venerate, one stood at the pinnacle of the realm. Even if a first tier were to meet a seventh tier, all they needed to do was cup their hands and greet respectfully. However, this was no indication that a first tier would be able to act cocky in front of a seventh tier. As such, Ling Han's cocky attitude had ignited a fury in all of them. He was merely a third tier. Ling Han raised his shoulders and said, Cocky am I? That's just because I have the strength to back it up. The purple-robed fourth tier was utterly speechless. Where did this brat get the audacity to speak such insolent things? It seems a peaceful resolution is out of the picture, the white flames heavenly venerate said coldly. He was not surprised at this turn of events. Back when Ling Han had still been a first tier, he had been just as arrogant in front of an even larger number of fourth tiers. As such, the white flames didn't find it strange that things would turn out like this. Ling Han, don't waste your breath on them. Let's fight. Hunyo chimed in, being the battle maniac that she was. She opened her little mouth to reveal 2 sharp canines. Ling Han looked towards the white flames heavenly venerate and said, Little White, are you brave enough to fight me? I won't be too hard on you. I'll use only one hand. To a heavenly venerate, there was no difference between using both hands or a single finger. However, Ling Han's words were clearly meant to provoke, and the white flames heavenly venerate's expression quickly turned dark. No matter how much of a monster Ling Han was, the mere act of a third tier mocking him made him very upset. Let me teach you some manners. The purple-robed fourth tier struck out and tried to suppress Ling Han. To him, Ling Han was nothing but a mere third tier. No matter how legendary the rumors made him out to be, there was no way he could compete against a fourth tier. Ling Han shook his head and then waved his left hand towards the purple-robed fourth tier. Pung! A loud noise resounded, and the surrounding mountains crumbled one after another. Even the skies were quaking under the terrifying force. The purple-robed fourth tier couldn't stop himself from falling backwards, finally coming to a halt after a dozen steps. However, to a heavenly venerate, a simple step was sufficient to cross a considerable distance, and the purple-robed fourth tier soon vanished from sight. Coming back as quickly as he had retreated, the purple-robed fourth tier soon reappeared using a few steps. He was shocked to see that Ling Han had not moved a single inch. It was as though their roles were reversed, and Ling Han was the fourth tier. Chapter 2892. 2892, you know young Master Fei? Chapter 2892. 2892, you know young Master Fei. 2892, you know young Master Fei. Even the White Flame's heavenly venerate didn't expect such an outcome, and turned pale with shock. In a battle of a third tier against fourth tier, Ling Han actually still gained the upper hand. They had to be seeing things. The purple-robed fourth tier took a deep breath. So you're freakish to this extent. Not bad, not bad. Previously, it was indeed our juniors who were blind and only asking to be humiliated. Ling Han possessed the battle prowess of a fourth tier, which meant that he was a fourth tier heavenly venerate. If a third tier was disrespectful towards him, he would have deserved a beating, just like how Ling Han was disrespectful to him just now, and how he hadn't even hesitated to suppress him. However, it would be less easy to resolve the matter now, he said calmly, but his tone was filled with killing intent. How could he endure public humiliation like this, as if a fourth tier like him was actually no match for a third tier? Wang, a blurry seal appeared on his forehead. His entire body also emitted a silver glow, and his aura surged. With the enhancement of the heavenly venerable seal, his battle prowess instantly increased by more than 10 times. It was an 8th grade seal. Although it was only an 8th grade seal, heavenly venerable seals were rare, and most of the heavenly venerable seals contained in raw stones were of the 9th grade. As such, 8th grade seals were very, very extraordinary. He roared again. The spot between his brows split open, and a precious tower flew out. It had a total of 18 levels, and every level seemed like crystal, emanating the air of primal chaos. With a loud roar, he controlled the precious tower to make it descend down towards Ling Han. The precious tower spun gently and enlarged continuously. As the air of primal chaos descended, it seemed to be even heavier than a whole dimension. This was not impossible because it had been forged by a fourth tier, so it was definitely no difficult task for it to destroy a low-level dimension with a single strike. Ling Han smiled faintly and pointed a finger. Pum! He was so nonchalant, but the purple-robed fourth tier's precious tower immediately flew backwards, and his entire body was knocked back. This time, everyone's expression didn't change. Instead, they were shocked to the core. Not only did the purple-robed fourth tier use a heavenly venerable seal, but he also took out a heavenly venerate tool and activated it with a secret technique. It could be said that he had fully unleashed his abilities. But how did Ling Han respond? He had only casually pointed out a finger, and the purple-robed fourth tier's precious tool had already flown out of his hands, and his body had been sent flying. What kind of enormous difference in strength was this? If Ling Han had been in the fourth tier and the purple-robed man was in the third tier, this result would have been acceptable to everyone. Are you still continuing? Ling Han said to the purple-robed fourth tier. The latter had already run back for the second time. Ling Han had shown mercy. He had only sent the other party flying, but had not seriously injured him. The purple-robed fourth tier gritted his teeth, but he couldn't say anything. What could he say? A fourth tier couldn't even crush a third tier, yet he was easily defeated when he went all out. How could he still have the face to say anything? However, he was still defiant. He felt that there was a limit to how much stronger Ling Han was compared to him. After all, he had not been injured either time. Most importantly, Ling Han's attitude was too displeasing. It was as if Purple Robe wasn't a heavenly venerate, but just a random passerby. Young man, you are indeed freakish, and your battle prowess is astonishing. The blue-robed fourth tier stepped forward. However, being overly hard would make it easy to break. You are too arrogant, and it is unavoidable that you will offend many people. Moreover, have you heard of a saying? He paused for a moment. 2 fists are no match for 4 hands won. Ling Han laughed loudly and wagged his finger. I've only heard of this, saying a lion enters a flock of sheep too. In other words, you're a bunch of trash. No matter how many of you there are, it's useless. I can suppress all of you single-handedly. Being ridiculed by him in this manner, the 5 fourth tiers, including the white flames heavenly venerate, revealed extremely furious expressions. Too arrogant, too arrogant. Young man, it's not a good thing to be too flashy, the white flames heavenly venerate said calmly. Today, I'll teach you a good lesson. The 5 fourth tiers all walked out together. Boom! They each channeled a heavenly venerable seal, and primal chaos, chi, poured out from their pores, and they transformed into 5 gods. Any one of them could suppress the heavens with a single hand. Ling Han didn't mind. His current target was already placed at the 5th tier. As for 4th tiers, to say nothing of 5, even 100 of them might not be enough. Die! The 5 heavenly venerates attacked in unison, suppressing Ling Han. This was an incomparably terrifying power, enough to make any 4th tier's expression change and force them to retreat. Ling Han stretched out his finger again and casually pointed out. Pung! The 5 heavenly venerates immediately scattered as if flowers, completely unable to withstand a single blow. Pa, pa, pa! The white flames heavenly venerate and the others fell to the ground one after another. This time, Ling Han had used a lot of strength, causing all of them to cough up blood continuously. Those 3rd tiers and 2nd tiers all opened their mouths wide and their eyes widened. How was this possible? How could they believe this? 5 4th tier elites were crushed like dried weeds, as if their opponent was not a 3rd tier elite, but a 5th tier elite. 5th tier. They looked at Ling Han, and their bodies couldn't help but tremble. Could it be that this person had tier-surpassing battle prowess of 2 cultivation levels? However, advancing from the 4th tier to the 5th tier was a huge leap. There were very few people in the world who possessed 5th tier battle prowess at 4th tier, not to mention that Ling Han was only a 3rd tier. Monster, an absolute monster. Ling Han looked at the white flames heavenly venerate. I told you that I would remember you. One day, I'd settle scores with you, right? The white flames heavenly venerate's heart was in utter despair. This freakish person was definitely not human. He could possess the power of 5th tier at 3rd tier. He said dejectedly, that's right. All right. Ling Han threw a punch. Pung! The white flames heavenly venerate was immediately blasted apart. Back then, the other man had charged to their doors, wanting to kill Ling Han and extract the heavenly venerable seals from him, and did not give him a way out, either. What right did he have now to ask Ling Han to show mercy? Naturally, Ling Han had to kill him. Ling Han then looked at the other 4 4th tiers. As his gaze swept over them, their bodies trembled involuntarily. Sir, we are from the Xuanwu Alliance, the purple-robed 4th tier said. At this time, he could only use his background to intimidate and scare Ling Han. Xuanwu Alliance. Ling Han was astounded. Previously, it was he who had killed members of the Xuanwu Alliance, which meant that he did not even manage to participate in the fight for the last, most valuable vein of ore. He could only retreat and find a place to enter into seclusion for his breakthrough. Unexpectedly, as the saying went, destiny will make enemies meet. They met people from the Xuanwu Alliance here. The Xuanwu Alliance was a 5th tier force. Although it was still slightly inferior to a 6th tier force, there were only about 100 6th tier forces in the world, and a 5th tier force was already quite strong. Seeing that Ling Han was hesitating, the purple-robed 4th tier and the others all revealed excited expressions. Seeing a glimmer of hope, Ling Han chuckled and said, What rank is Fei Baiju's father in the Xuanwu Alliance? Lord Fei Wu. The purple-robed 4th tier was stunned. He did not expect Ling Han to actually mention Fei Baiju and his old man, but the hope in his heart became even stronger. It would be even better if the two of them had a friendship. It was Lord Fei Wu and Lord Qi Xian who established the Xuanwu alliance together, and he is one of the two alliance leaders. He couldn't help but ask, "Sir, do you know young Master Fei?" He didn't dare to say that Fei Baizhu was already dead, as he was afraid that Ling Han wouldn't admit this friendship because of this. "I know him. Of course I know him," Ling Han said with a smile. "I killed him with my own hands, so how could I not know him? You really like to joke." Pooh! The purple-robed fourth tier and the others all spluttered. Chapter 2893. 2893 Waiting for Trash. Chapter 2893. 2893 Waiting for Trash. 2893 Waiting for Trash. Ling Han nodded and said, "My cultivation level is increasing, so it's inevitable that I'll have to fight against such an elite. Why don't we fight now?" "Are you confident?" the Empress asked again. Ling Han nodded. Hee. Since Ling Han said he's confident, then he definitely is. Hunyo said laughingly. The three of them continued to mine, with a cheat-like Grandmaster of Raw Stone like Ling Han around. Their mining speed was astonishingly fast. However, this or vein specialized in producing great herbs, and not a single heavenly venerable seal could be found, causing Ling Han to feel extremely disappointed. Great herbs aren't bad either. They can help you improve your cultivation level without falling behind. The Empress consoled him. Ling Han nodded. After he advanced to the third tier, even the life essence of a fourth tier elite was not enough for him. He would absorb it all in a few breaths. If he wanted to feel bloated like before, he would definitely need a fifth tier. However, the raw stones here are almost all mined. Why isn't that trash here yet? Is he really such trash? Another 10 days passed, and the ore vein was completely mined. Ling Han decided to wait for another 10 days for Fei Wu. If Fei Wu still did not come, then he could not be bothered to wait any longer. In any case, there would come a time when they would meet again in the future, and Fei Wu was not the only fifth tier in the world. However, only 7 days later, Fei Wu arrived. An extremely terrifying aura enveloped Ling Han, instantly causing him to come to his senses. He felt as if he was facing Xian Chihu. However, he was no longer the second tier of the past, and his current battle prowess could completely rival that of a fifth tier. "I'm here." A leisurely voice rang out. Boom! Even though the voice clearly wasn't loud, the mountains collapsed one after another, and the entire mountain range was flattened in an instant. Of course, heavenly venerates would have this kind of divine might, but generally speaking, heavenly venerates would control it as there was no need to cause great destruction. This would cause them to be easily targeted by the heaven and earth, and should the collective power of the entire dimension be used to suppress them, even a seventh tier would also suffer. However, this was the void. The dimension had died long ago, so they naturally weren't afraid of being targeted. Furthermore, this person was probably filled with anger as well. Ling Han floated up with a smile, hands behind his back, and said, "So trash is here." "You won't benefit at all from being glib-tongued in front of me." A figure appeared. He was extremely short, and upon closer inspection, it was actually a little boy who was only 5 or 6 BU too tall. However, he was bearing an extremely mature expression. Ling Han was astounded. "I say, trash, you merely have a terrible name, but there's no need to reform your already grown body, right?" That little boy instantly revealed a furious expression. He was Fei Wu, a dignified fifth-tier heavenly venerate. The reason why he had turned into a little boy was because of a secret technique he had created himself. He continuously repeated the process of being born, growing up, and dying of old age to comprehend his Tao. However, Ling Han was too wicked, actually making fun of his name. "Brother Fei, there's no need to lower yourself to the level of a mere third tier." Another voice rang out, and a slender man appeared by Fei Wu's side. He was handsome and energetic, and whether it was in terms of appearance or bearing, there were no negative points to speak of. This was the other alliance leader of the Xuanwu Alliance, Qi Xian. He was also a 5th-tier heavenly venerate. Ling Han looked at him and said, "Sissy, what are you talking about?" Qi Xian couldn't help but be stunned. Sissy. He was a little handsome, but he had nothing to do with being a sissy, okay? How could this brat speak so carelessly and attack so powerfully with his tongue? He's just sharp-tongued. Don't mind him, just suppress him. Fei Wu said. His feet moved, and he was already closing in on Ling Han. He stretched out a hand, and it transformed into a huge mountain. There were seals radiating with light, and there were phenomena of sun, moon, and stars, as if he was opening up a new world. 5th-tier elites were indeed extraordinary, as if they could create a world with a single thought. "Suppress your sister!" Ling Han roared and took the initiative to counter the attack. Pum! 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 The battle between the two great elites was incomparably intense. Qi Xian couldn't help but reveal a look of surprise, because while Fei Wu had the upper hand, Ling Han wasn't much inferior. He was definitely capable of fighting back. One had to know that Fei Wu was at the middle stage of 5th tier, only slightly inferior to Qi Xian. Of course, if this continued, there would come a day when Fei Wu would be able to win, but who knew how long that would take? Furthermore, Ling Han could completely escape at any time. With battle prowess on the same level, it would be easy for either of them to leave. Chapter 2894. 2894 Fighting 5th Tier. Chapter 2894. 2894 Fighting 5th Tier. 2894 Fighting 5th Tier. Boom! This punch was incomparably terrifying. Ling Han's figure flashed, dodging this attack, and he calmly said, "In a battle of 5th tier against 3rd tier, you still want to join forces? You have no respect for your elders. I just want to teach you a lesson." Qi Xian said nonchalantly. At his level, he no longer cared about what others said. Of course, Ling Han's mouth was especially vicious, and that was another matter. Ling Han shook his head and said, "Seeing the two of you appear together, I guessed that you would definitely join forces with your shamelessness. Otherwise, why would you have come?" Qi Xian paid Ling Han no regard at all. He threw another punch. "Ling Han, why don't you dare to face it head-on?" Fei Wu also flew over and attacked with all his might. "Weren't you very arrogant?" Ling Han was also a little speechless and said, "The two of you, both 5th tiers, joined forces to attack me, and you still want me to face you head-on? Although I've already expected your shamelessness, I still didn't expect you to be shameless to this extent." The two great 5th tier heavenly venerates acted as if they hadn't heard anything. No matter what Ling Han said, as long as they killed him, he naturally would become quiet. However, to kill me, do you guys think that is possible? Ling Han asked calmly. The answer to his question came in the form of violent attacks unleashed by two great heavenly venerates. Ling Han let out a long cry, and the heavenly venerable sea he had used before immediately dimmed. Replacing it was the only first-grade seal he had mastered. Instantly, his battle prowess increased by more than 40 times. Pung, pung, pung. He sent Fei Wu and Qi Xian flying with 3 punches and 2 kicks. In terms of power, he absolutely suppressed them. This time, Fei Wu's and Qi Xian's eyes widened as if they had seen a ghost. In the face of such power, they were like children who were facing an adult. They were completely powerless. What kind of heavenly venerable seal is this? It can actually produce such a terrifying enhancement of power? They both asked with trembling voices. It increased by at least 70 times. No, it should have reached 80 times. This is a first-grade seal. Their eyes lit up in surprise and delight. Chapter 2895. 2895 Killing Fei Wu. Chapter 2895. 2895 Killing Fei Wu. 2895 Killing Fei Wu. First grade seal. Heavenly Venerable Seals were rare, and only the more widely known had appeared in the world. Otherwise, when Ling Han had obtained a 7th grade Heavenly Venerable Seal in the realm battlefield, it would have been impossible for so many Heavenly Venerate to come knocking on his door to demand it. One could imagine how astonishing a 1st grade seal was. It would greatly increase the strength of a Heavenly Venerate, to say nothing of the fact that a 5th tier Heavenly Venerate would go crazy over it. Even a 7th tier would be envious. A junior like you can really give people a surprise, Qi Xian said with a smile. In his opinion, even if Ling Han possessed a 1st grade seal, it would not be enough to strike fear in him, because if he and Fei Wu joined forces, they could completely stop Ling Han. At most, they would only be at a disadvantage. Worst came to worst, they would definitely be able to endure it for 2 hours. He didn't believe that Ling Han still had a 2nd, 1st grade Heavenly Venerable Seal. Oh! Ling Han smiled faintly. Surprise? I thought you were going to say shock. Haha, you can't even imagine the trials and tribulations I've gone through in my life. Do you think you can scare me with just this? Qi Xian said coldly, appearing extremely disdainful. He was a supreme elite of the 5th tier. Which of those who could reach this level wasn't a supreme elite of the world? Fei Wu stood at the sidelines and didn't rush him. Ling Han was still channeling this 1st grade seal, so they were naturally happy for Ling Han to exhaust the energy of this seal for nothing. It would be best if they could stall for 2 hours like this. Then he and Qi Xian would be able to easily take Ling Han's head, and it was not just a single Heavenly Venerable Seal they would obtain from him. At this moment, he was already thinking about how he could snatch that 1st grade seal. It was too precious. Ling Han was not in a hurry, either. The 1st grade seal was his trump card. Wrong. Qi Xian actually dared to say that it was a surprise. He would let the other party know that this was definitely a shock and a nightmare. He stopped channeling the Heavenly Venerable Seal in his body. They wanted him to waste the power for nothing? He wasn't stupid. Seeing this, Qi Xian and Fei Wu both frowned. It seemed that they could only fight and force Ling Han to use all of his ultimate moves. After exhausting this 1st grade seal, Ling Han finally could only be at their mercy. The two of them originally had their own intentions, thinking about how they could obtain that 1st grade seal after Ling Han's death. However, they had yet to deal with Ling Han, so it was still too early to think about these things. Take this brat down. All right. The two of them set aside their petty schemes and charged towards Ling Han. They channeled their Heavenly Venerable Seals and unleashed all their secret techniques, attacking Ling Han without holding anything back. Ling Han let out a long cry and once again channeled that 1st grade seal, clashing with the 2 5th tier elites. Pung, pung, pung. His strength was invincible. Qi Xian and Fei Wu were like paper figurines in front of him. They were sent flying by his casual punches and kicks. Soon they were covered in wounds. If this had been any other opponent, they would definitely have already retreated. If they continued to be injured like this, it might affect their foundations and affect their future advancement to a higher cultivation level. But now they couldn't retreat. Ling Han was only a 3rd tier. Furthermore, the Heavenly Venerable Seal was only effective for a limited time. As long as they could endure Ling Han's wave of dominance, it would be their turn to display their might. With such thoughts in mind, they gritted their teeth and persevered. A 1st grade seal was definitely worth the risk. Ling Han naturally knew what they were thinking. Unfortunately, these two people didn't know that Ling Han was already leading them around by the nose. The two elites held on with all their might. Finally, 2 hours had passed. The seal on Ling Han's body quickly dimmed. The energy release had ended, and it could no longer be used. Brat, your death is here. Qi Xian and Fei Wu both channeled another 6th grade seal. Their battle prowess was almost unaffected. Ha ha ha, they finally made it to this moment. Ling Han smiled calmly and said, "You guys are celebrating too early. You still don't know who the prey is, do you? Are you trying to say that you still have other trump cards? Qi Xian said disdainfully. Don't tell me you have a second first-grade seal. Fei Wu also laughed. Open your eyes wide and watch. Ling Han let out a long cry. Wang, wang, wang. Densely packed seals flashed out of his body, and there were at least 100 of them. Qi Xian and Fei Wu were both shocked. They had not expected Ling Han to actually have mastered so many heavenly venerable seals. However, what was the use of having so many? They were not combination seals, so how much power could they unleash? You are just bluff. Peng. Before Fei Wu could finish speaking, he had already been struck by Ling Han's fist. He raised his fist to meet it, but his arm exploded upon contact with this force. The remaining force did not dissipate, and a hole was instantly blasted into his chest. The cold smile on Qi Xian's face immediately disappeared. What a terrifying power! A single punch had broken through Fei Wu's defense and penetrated through his body. The late stage of the 5th tier, or the peak stage. Ling Han took advantage of his victory to follow up with another series of fists of fury towards Fei Wu. Qi Xian hurriedly made his move, wanting to exert pressure for Ling Han so that Fei Wu could catch his breath. However, Ling Han didn't even turn around. With a single punch, Qi Xian was sent flying. All the bones in his body were creaking, and he couldn't stop trembling for a long time, as if he was about to shatter. On the other side, the pressure on Fei Wu was even greater. Ling Han had already closed the distance between them completely, and his fists were firing down on Fei Wu, forcing the latter to raise his hands to block. Otherwise, he would definitely die. However, Ling Han's strength was simply too great. In just 2 or 3 punches, his other arm had also turned into a rain of blood. He gritted his teeth and forcibly regenerated his arms. At the level of heavenly venerable tier, even though one's strength was inconceivably powerful, and one's physique was also incomparably tough, one's self-healing ability was actually inferior to that of a celestial king. What was this about? Because heavenly venerate surpassed regulations, celestial medicine was completely ineffective for them. If they wanted to forcefully regrow their lost limbs, there was only one way: use their own blood essence to stimulate the growth. If a heavenly venerate expended a large amount of blood essence, they would also be severely injured. In serious cases, it wouldn't even be strange if their cultivation level dropped. Forget trying to break through to a higher cultivation level. However, Fei Wu had no other choice. If he didn't regenerate his arms, his torso and mind would be the ones to be blown apart. If one died, everything would be for naught. Peng, 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 his arms continued to regenerate and then to be continuously blown apart. This seemed to allow him to struggle at death's door, but Ling Han's strength was truly too terrifying. Not only did he shatter Fei Wu's arms, but the recoil also affected the latter's entire body. Soon, Fei Wu was vomiting blood repeatedly, and his resistance became weaker and weaker. Ling Han. Qi Xian charged over from a distance. He had been punched by Ling Han, and it was only now that he managed to suppress the boiling in his body and charge back. Ling Han ignored him, and his punches became more and more violent. Peng, 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 peng. Fei Wu finally couldn't keep up with his rhythm, and was blasted into bits. A 5th-tier elite had fallen. Qi Xian was already closing in. Upon seeing this, he turned around and left without hesitation. Chapter 2896. 2896 Drawing Fire. Chapter 2896. 2896 Drawing Fire. 2896 Drawing Fire. In terms of conventional battle prowess, Qi Xian believed that he could crush Ling Han. However, that could not hold up against the fact that Ling Han possessed astonishing combination seals. Those were too terrifying and were enough to increase Ling Han's strength by more than 200 times. As a late-stage 5th tier, he could only concede defeat. Was it not clear that Fei Wu had already been blasted into bits by Ling Han's punch? If Qi Xian stubbornly continued to resist, he would only be blasted into pieces by Ling Han. However, if he didn't exhaust Ling Han's set of combination seals, wouldn't that mean that he would never be a match for Ling Han? Only by inviting at least 3 to 4 fifth tiers to engage in consecutive battles against Ling Han would Ling Han's strength be beaten back to its original state after 2 hours. Qi Xian didn't believe that Ling Han could still possess a second set of combination seals. The problem was that if they forcefully faced off against the current Ling Han, then even a 5th tier would be blasted into smithereens. Who would be willing to sacrifice themselves for others? There was no such fool in the world. Qi Xian ran as fast as he could, but countless thoughts were already rushing through his mind. In the end, he decided to borrow the hand of another to kill Ling Han. Whether it was that first-grade seal or the even more shocking combination seals, he wanted them all. Ling Han didn't pursue Qi Xian for too long. The two of them could be considered to be of the same cultivation level now. Even if there was a disparity in strength, if one of them wanted to leave, the other person simply wouldn't be able to catch up. It was a bit of a pity, but Ling Han did not take it to heart. He had an invincible heart, and he would become stronger with every passing day. Now he was no longer afraid of Qi Xian, and he certainly would not be in the future. Ling Han first refined Fei Wu's life essence. Although Fei Wu's name was Trash, the life essence in his body was exuberant to the extreme and shockingly dense. Although he was only one person, it was enough to make Ling Han feel bloated. If he were to kill Qi Xian as well, he would definitely feel extremely uncomfortable. As expected of 5th tier, his body had been tempered by 4 types of fundamental powers. It was simply a super great herb. It took some time for Ling Han to completely refine all of this life essence. He stood up and continued to search for new veins of, or with the Empress and Hunyao. Every once in a while, they would enter the celestial guest residence and meet with the other women. As a family, they naturally had to be together. In addition, Ling Han also worked hard to increase the number of people with the bloodline of the Ling clan. But even a freakish person like him couldn't rush such things. Tens of thousands to hundreds of millions of years had passed, yet none of the women's stomachs had swelled with pregnancy, making Hunyao cry out at the unfairness of it all. Niao couldn't be bullied like this. This dimension encompassed other dimensions, and it was inevitable that every dimension would be slightly smaller than the previous one. There were differences, even among high-level dimensions. Therefore, after hundreds of millions of years of digging, the veins of, or on this level, were quickly dug clean. Everyone turned their attention to the 5th dimension. Indeed, this dimension existed, but the path downward was even more difficult. Under the intense pressure of the overlapping dimensions, the friction and collision of the fundamental particles had already reached an incomparably terrifying level, and even 2nd tiers could not force their way in. Furthermore, there were even fewer veins of, or in the 5th dimension. However, the probability of producing heavenly venerable seals and great herbs was higher, and the profits here weren't any lower than in the previous 4 dimensions. Right at this moment, Ling Han heard a piece of news that was extremely disadvantageous to him. It was said that Ling Han had a 1st-grade seal and even a complete set of 9th-grade seals. When combined, it could erupt with more than 200 times the power. After Ling Han heard this news, his first thought was naturally that it was Qi Xian's doing. Right now, only Qi Xian knew of his big secret. Ling Han only had to think for a moment to know what Qi Xian was up to. This guy wanted to use others to exhaust Ling Han's chance to use the 1st-grade seal and combination seals. Then he would take the opportunity to kill Ling Han and seize the heavenly venerable seals. This plan was quite clever. However, after thinking about it carefully, it was actually not reliable. Firstly, Ling Han was also at the 5th tier in terms of strength. Even if Qi Xian could gain an advantage in battle prowess, how could he stop Ling Han from escaping? Secondly, there were still 6 tiers in this world. If 6 tiers interfered, Would there still be a share for Qi Xian? Of course. Ling Han would not be having a headache on Qi Xian's behalf. He knew that he was about to face the pursuit of many elites. Sure enough, several years later, the trio encountered a group of elites, and the latter directly attacked without saying a word. In the end, Ling Han killed them easily. Mere fourth tiers actually dared to attack him. Obviously, Qi Xian had only said that Ling Han possessed precious heavenly venerable seals, and had not told the truth that, in fact, Ling Han's battle prowess had even reached the 5th tier. If he really said that, then even 5th tier elites would naturally be wary of Ling Han, and it would be impossible for them to move easily. Wouldn't that just be paving the way for others? This was only the beginning. Following that, even more heavenly venerates came looking for Ling Han. Ling Han, a 5th tier elite, appeared. He wore a black robe, and his entire body exuded a faint chill. Hand over the heavenly venerable seals yourself, and you can avoid death. Ling Han looked around and asked, "You're alone?" The black-robed 5th tier couldn't help but be angered to laughter. To suppress a puny 3rd tier like you, how many 5th tiers does it take? Ling Han nodded very seriously and said, "You're right. Looks like you don't intend to be honest and obedient." The black-robed 5th tier cultivator moved to suppress Ling Han. Pum, pum, pum. Ling Han raised his fists to counterattack. He had only boosted himself with a 7th grade seal, but it was enough to suppress his opponent. What? The black-robed 5th tier turned pale with fright. This was something he had not expected at all. Not only could a 3rd tier rival him, he could even in fact suppress him. He hurriedly channeled a heavenly venerable seals as well, and his battle prowess instantly shot up, moving to clash head-on with Ling Han. He was in the middle stage of the 5th tier, and his conventional battle prowess was slightly stronger than Ling Han's. Furthermore, he was channeling a 6th grade seal, and the effect of his power enhancement far exceeded that of a 7th grade seal. Naturally, he instantly reversed the disadvantage and suppressed Ling Han instead. "Do you think I don't have a high-level heavenly venerable seal?" he said coldly, appearing very disdainful. "Is that so?" Ling Han couldn't help but shake his head. The 1st grade seal was already activated. "Comparing heavenly venerable seals with me, are you stupid?" When the 1st grade seal appeared, it boosted Ling Han's strength by 80 times, so he naturally had the upper hand again. The black-robed 5th tier couldn't help but be speechless. That's right. Didn't he run over to look for Ling Han because the latter had mastered a 1st grade seal and those even more terrifying combination seals? Now he was actually competing with him in heavenly venerable seals. Wasn't he just foolish? A look of astonishment appeared on his face. The current Ling Han was already so terrifying. What if he used those combination seals then? Would he die? With this thought in mind, he naturally had the intention to retreat. "You want to leave? It's too late now." Ling Han shook his head. Previously, it was naturally easy for the other party to escape, but now that he was already entangled, it would be strange if he could still escape. Chapter 2897. 2897 Fighting Xian Chihu Again. Chapter 2897. 2897 Fighting Xian Chihu Again. 2897 Fighting Xian Chihu Again. Ling Han no longer held back. He channeled the combination seals, and his power surged once again, reaching a level at which he could completely suppress his opponent. That black-robed 5th tier was unable to withstand it at all, and was violently blasted apart with just over a dozen punches. Large amounts of life essence gushed into Ling Han's body, causing him to shake his head. How could there be someone so stupid? Why did he have to come alone to court death? Thinking about it again, this was normal. Who wouldn't want to monopolize the treasures? However, who would have thought that Ling Han's strength would be so great? It was conceivable that there would be no shortage of such people. In the future, there would be an endless stream of them coming to court death. Sure enough, just over 10 days later, Ling Han was targeted by another fifth tier. He didn't say anything, and directly moved to suppress Ling Han. He was extremely domineering. The fifth tier could indeed be so unreasonable, but unfortunately his opponent was Ling Han. Naturally, there was no need to mention what would happen to him. His only fate was death. In a battle at the same cultivation level, the prerequisite for escaping was that one had to act quickly and not be entangled by the other party. Otherwise, one would only be blasted to pieces with a single strike. Time continued to pass, and more fourth tiers and fifth tiers died in Ling Han's hands. Naturally, people realized that something was wrong. Although Ling Han was a little annoyed, the life essence of a fifth-tier elite at this stage was too beneficial for him. After several thousand years, his cultivation had actually advanced to the middle stage of the third tier. This was extremely astonishing progress. If he could continue like this, then Ling Han would only need around 10,000 years to reach the peak stage of the third tier and break through to the fourth tier. Not even Lin Yulian and Xian Chihu of the past could compare to him. However, how could there be so many good things in the world? Moreover, there were only around 1,000 fifth-tier heavenly venerates in total. Was he really going to kill all of them so that he could increase his cultivation level? The following fifth tiers that made a move on Ling Han afterwards were not so stupid. All of them came in groups. Their numbers would range from as few as 3 or 4 to as many as 6 or 7 of them, which caused Ling Han to have no choice but to feel wary, and he did not dare battle them to the death. He adopted the strategy of roaming around and fighting and mining raw stones as he ran. After more than 100,000 years, this dimension was almost empty as well. Ling Han decided to head towards the sixth dimension. Although the further down he went, the more difficult it would be. His limit was the fifth tier, so he should be able to go down 2 or 3 more dimensions. The trio set off into the depths of the ground layer. The environment here was even worse, and even third tiers would find it hard to endure. Fortunately, the Empress and Hunyo both had fourth tier battle prowess, and they could still enter the celestial guest residence in the worst case. With the power of the heavenly venerate tool and Ling Han's protection, it should not be a problem for them to withstand fifth-tier attacks. More than 10 years later, they finally arrived at the sixth dimension. At this point, Ling Han was no longer thinking about why the dimensions here could be layered on top of each other, perhaps overlapping and overlapping endlessly. What kind of power had created this? It was impossible for him to figure it out. Forget it. Let's go find the vein of ore. Undoubtedly, this dimension was even smaller, and it was severely damaged. In many places, one could directly see the void. Terrifying energy storms rushed out, and they could easily strike second tiers to death. One had to be in the third tier to match them. This was also why only third-tier elites were qualified for interdimensional travel. However, third tier was only the minimum requirement for interdimensional travel. Some energy storms were formed by a mixture of the 6 fundamental particles, which was equivalent to the blow from a pseudo-7th tier. That was truly terrifying. It should be that even Zhou Heng, Chu Hao, and the other 6 tiers would not dare to face this head-on. What was even more dangerous was that the ground here was too fragile. No one knew which piece of land would suddenly shatter and spew out a terrifying energy storm that would strangle people to death. Ling Han and the others were cautious. So what if Ling Han had fifth-tier battle prowess? They did not dare to be careless here. This dimension seemed to have been destroyed, and the degree of destruction was astonishing. It was estimated to be only 1% of the size it used to be. However, dimensions were dimensions after all. Even a low-level dimension like the celestial realm was incomparably huge, and there were still plenty of places to explore. Needless to say, the environment here was extremely dangerous, but the output was also astonishing. Ling Han had already obtained 3 yellow great herb, and had even found 2 fifth-grade seals. Their value was extremely astonishing. One day, Ling Han suddenly felt a strong throbbing in his heart. He abruptly raised his head to look at the sky, only to see a figure streak across the sky and stand above his head. "I finally found you," this person said calmly, exuding a domineering aura. "Xin Chihu. This pesky guy." Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "I was just about to challenge you to a battle. You came just in time." "Ha ha ha! Do you think you're qualified to be presumptuous in front of me just because you've advanced to the 3rd tier?" Xin Chihu shook his head. "You're not worthy. You're far from it. When did you become the king of chatter? Come, make your move." Ling Han's fighting spirit was high. His first battle with Xin Chihu had ended with him fleeing in defeat, which made him very displeased. "Humph! You still haven't gotten rid of your bad mouth." Xin Chihu delivered a palm strike. He clearly hadn't used any secret techniques or heavenly venerable seals, but this palm strike was still so overbearing and peerless that even 5th-tier elites would shiver in fear. This was battle prowess at the peak stage of the 5th tier. Now that Ling Han had a direct understanding, he immediately determined Xin Chihu's strength. He was unafraid. He activated a heavenly venerable seal, raising his battle prowess to the peak stage of the 5th tier, and then threw a punch. Pum! The giant palm collided with the fist, forming a mushroom-shaped ball of energy that spread in all directions. Fortunately, the Empress and Hunyao were currently in the celestial guest residence, so they didn't have to worry about being affected by this power. Otherwise, they would still frown at this, even with their cultivation levels. "Ha! After advancing into the 3rd tier, your strength has greatly improved." Xin Chihu sneered. Xiao, his figure descended, and his palms struck out like battle axes, every blow ruthless, forcing Ling Han to have no choice but to use his full strength in order to match him. As expected of the greatest prodigy of all eternity, how powerful! Ling Han had killed even several 5th tiers. Yet Xin Chihu was suppressing Ling Han as a 4th tier and had not even used any heavenly venerable seals. This battle prowess was truly formidable. Ling Han did not feel that anything was wrong with this. If Xin Chihu did not have such strength, how could he possibly expect to become a 7th tier elite? With his cultivation level of 3rd tier, Ling Han could barely match the strongest prodigy who was in the 4th tier. If word got out, his reputation would definitely soar, and he would directly crush the 3 greatest prodigies of all eternity, enjoying the honor of being number 1 alone. Looks like I have to get a bit serious. Xin Chihu finally channeled a heavenly venerable seal, but it was only a 9th grade seal. It clearly only increased his strength by 5 times, but it immediately gave him the upper hand. Both of them were supreme prodigies, and their natural talent and techniques in battle were impeccable. In a situation where their power was equal, it was absolutely difficult for them to determine who was stronger. Thus, once Xin Chihu gained the upper hand in terms of power, he naturally suppressed Ling Han. Ling Han parried a few moves, but was hit by a few consecutive palm strikes, causing all the bones in his body to feel like they were about to fall apart. He could only increase the stakes, channeling a 6th grade seal to balance the power difference again. With this, the two of them were evenly matched. Chapter 2898, 2898, 4, 1st grade seals. Chapter 2898, 2898, 4 1st grade seals. 2898, 4 1st grade seals. Ling Han, your true power is ultimately inferior to mine, Xin Chihu said coldly. This is the difference in pure strength and not something that the heavenly venerable seals can make up for. Is that so? Ling Han shook his head. Since that's the case, why would you covet the heavenly venerable seals that I possess? Haha, killing you is my priority. The heavenly venerable seals are just a reward. Xin Chihu laughed loudly. He then channeled an 8th grade seal and once again suppressed Ling Han. Ling Han humphed. and a 5th grade seal lit up. Thus, Xian Chihu switched to a 7th grade seal. Ling Han next used a 4th grade seal, while Xian Chihu used a 6th grade seal. He was always able to suppress Ling Han. "Don't you have a 1st grade seal?" "Let me see it," Xian Chihu said nonchalantly. He was extremely proud and appeared incomparably confident. "As you wish." Ling Han finally channeled that 1st grade seal. Hong, his power instantly went off the charts, and the ground around him collapsed endlessly. This was a shattered dimension, and it had long since died. Without the slightest bit of suppression, how could it withstand the rampage of 5th tier? If the two of them fought for a while longer, the entire dimension might be destroyed. However, Ling Han couldn't care less now. His fighting spirit had been completely ignited, and he only wished for a grand battle. As expected, Xian Chihu nodded. His hands suddenly clenched into fists. Boom! His right fist shone. A blurry seal moved and emitted an incomparably astonishing aura. Pung! The two of them exchanged a punch and were sent flying at the same time. They were actually evenly matched. Ling Han's eyes narrowed. His true power was 30 times weaker than Xian Chihu's. Now he had channeled a 1st grade seal, yet he was only able to tie with Xian Chihu. This meant that Xian Chihu was using a 4th grade seal. Where did it come from? Was it something that he had comprehended on his own, or had it come from his old man who was a 7th tier? Boom! 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 The two of them clashed fiercely with terrifying power. This dimension was already incomparably dilapidated to begin with. Now that the two of them were wreaking havoc, it was naturally even more dilapidated. Pieces of the ground caved in. Some returned to become primal chaos, while other spots spewed out terrifying storms that soared into the skies like giant pillars. The commotion was so great that it attracted everyone from afar to witness the battle between the strongest prodigies. Isn't that Xian Chihu? His opponent, heavens, he's actually a 3rd tier. With the advantage of a whole cultivation level, Xian Chihu was actually unable to suppress his opponent. He's always been the one to defeat his opponent with a disadvantage in cultivation level. Why is it the other way around now? This person is Ling Han. Legend has it that he has a 1st grade seal. That's right. What he's channeling now is definitely that. Even though I'm a 4th tier, I still feel uncomfortable from being suppressed. The numerous heavenly venerates were all astonished. Ling Han was heaven-defying. Even the greatest prodigy of all eternity could not surpass him, and that was despite an advantage in cultivation level. Without a doubt, Ling Han was going to ascend to the throne of number 1 of all history. Some people were elated as defending against hysteria required an absolute prodigy like this, while others had cold smiles on their faces, coveting the heavenly venerable seals in Ling Han's possession, and even more so keen on obtaining the secret to Ling Han's power. Ling Han, on the other hand, had forgotten everything. He only wanted to have a big battle and display all of his abilities. Not bad, not bad. You are very, very strong, Xian Chihu said with a smile. However, if your strength is only at this level, you will only die in the end. He switched to another heavenly venerable seal, but not only did his battle prowess not fall, it actually rose to another level. A 3rd grade seal. Ling Han was instantly suppressed. This was a difference of more than 10 times in power, and he was outmatched. This naturally caused everyone to exclaim in surprise. It turned out that Xian Chihu had actually hidden his strength. He actually still had a 3rd grade seal that he had yet to use. This time, Ling Han should be at his wit's end. He had already used a 1st grade seal. Could there be a heavenly venerable seal more impressive and awesome than this? Ling Han struggled to hold on. Although he was at a disadvantage in terms of power, the difference of more than 10 times in power could only suppress him, and it was still unable to truly defeat him. With his tenacious personality, How could he give up so easily? Your toughness is commendable. However, in the end, you are only a third tier. Xian Chihu sneered. He channeled another heavenly venerable seal. This time, an aura that transcended the ages circulated, making him seem as if he had transformed into a god of war. Peng, it was only a single punch, but Ling Han was sent flying. He was actually no match for a single blow. First grade seal. Ling Han wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, and a look of surprise appeared on his face. He absolutely did not believe that Xian Chihu could form a first-grade seal on his own. It should have been given to him by Xian Fu. It was not strange for a 7th-tier heavenly venerate to be able to master a first-grade seal. More importantly, it was a matter of how many such heavenly venerable seals they had mastered. Xian Chihu did not take advantage of the victory to continue his attack. He only placed his hands behind his back. How is it? SOO. Ling Han's fighting spirit was already completely boiling. Hong, his aura once again skyrocketed, and all 9th-grade seals lit up, forming a set of combination seals. In an instant, his battle prowess increased explosively by more than 200 times. He let out a long howl and charged toward Xian Chihu. You're not the only one with combination seals. Xian Chihu sneered. 3 more seals flashed behind him, and his battle prowess also began to increase rapidly. Peng! He exchanged a blow with Ling Han, and was actually not at a disadvantage at all. What? This time, Ling Han was truly shocked. He had not expected that Xian Chihu would actually be able to oppose him with only 4 seals. These were also combination seals, but just 4 of them were enough to contend against him. These 4 were all first-grade seals. Furthermore, they were adjacent to each other, so they could resonate with each other and unleash an amplification of 200 times. They weren't inferior to the complete combination of the 9th-grade seals at all. For first-grade seals, was this the potential of a 7th tier? A sense of helplessness rose in Ling Han's heart, but he immediately steeled his resolve. Don't forget that he was still 1 cultivation level lower than Xian Chihu. If the 2 of them were to truly fight at the same cultivation level, no matter how many first-grade seals Xian Chihu used, Ling Han would be able to suppress them with his might. Ling Han, what do you think? Xian Chihu said calmly with a faint smile. He had the initiative and was in control of the battle. Naturally, he was like a cat playing with a mouse. Ling Han laughed loudly and said, Nothing much. Wait until I advance into the 4th tier. Then I'll come and cut off your wretched head. Humph! Will you still have such a day? Xian Chihu approached closely. I'm not playing with you anymore. Ling Han directly flew into the void. To him, this was like an ocean, allowing him to soar freely. Xian Chihu did not give chase, other than a freak like Ling Han. Anyone without the guidance of a dimensional lighthouse would be like a headless fly, and would only lose their sense of direction. The void had always been a domain belonging to Hysteria, and no one dared to rashly set foot in it. Even if he had 5th-tier battle prowess, he still wouldn't dare to act recklessly. Unless he was in the 6th tier, he wouldn't be able to match it, and this was only because Hysteria's main body was restricted by several 7th tiers. Otherwise, even 6th tiers would be in trouble. He stood in his tracks as a strange smile appeared on his face. Chapter 2899 2899 Mission. Chapter 2899 2899 Mission. 2899 Mission. Xian Chihu just stood there. He had at least 4 first-grade seals, but no one dared to snatch them. He was a super elite with battle prowess at the peak of the 5th tier. It could be said that no one could suppress him unless he was a 6th tier himself. Moreover, Xian Chihu's father was a supreme being of the 7th tier. Who dared to touch Xian Chihu? Wasn't he afraid that Xian Fu would drop everything and come looking for him? Who wouldn't be afraid of the might of 7th tier? Ling Han entered into the void, just circled around, and then returned to this lost, overlapping dimension. He sat cross-legged and digested his battle experience with Xian Chihu. Ling Han had benefited a lot from fighting such super elites and prodigies. Not only had his cultivation level increased, but he had also refined his combat techniques. He spent 3 years in seclusion this time, and this was only the case because his thoughts could be accelerated. Otherwise, it would have taken much longer. "Something doesn't seem right," he muttered, but he couldn't figure out what was wrong, so he shook his head and stopped paying attention to this problem. Just as he was about to move, he suddenly grasped a special signal. Meng Dong. He had finally appeared. Previously, Meng Dong had made an agreement with Ling Han. When the latter grasped the signal, it meant that the former wanted to see him. Only special people like them could use the signal, and only they could grasp it. It was a very safe and reliable method of communication. Of course, it could only be used when they were relatively close, even if they were all heavenly venerates. This was a price that had to be paid for safety. However, even when both parties sent out the same signal, there was still a slight difference. It would be imbued with each person's unique intent, allowing them to completely differentiate who had sent out the signal. If not for that, Ling Han would have killed Meng Dong long ago. He would have used this signal to lure out all the remaining dregs of hysteria and killed them one by one. He would have been able to resolve this huge problem very quickly. In just a moment, Meng Dong flew over. "Little brother, long time no see. You really know how to run. If I hadn't seen your battle with Xian Chihu a few years ago, I wouldn't have known where to find you," he said. Ling Han took the opportunity to say, "I don't know where our base camp is. Even if I have something to discuss with you, I have nowhere to go." Meng Dong laughed heartily and said, "There's no need to rush. There's a mission for you to complete right now. This is a test for you from the Lord. As long as you complete this mission perfectly, you'll truly be accepted." Ling Han was shocked. Hysteria was actually still worried about him. When did he reveal any flaws? He was actually being guarded against. Thinking about it again, Ling Han was relieved. The others had all awakened as soon as they entered the Heavenly Venerable tier, but he had still not been awakened even at second tier. If Hysteria hadn't made a move and forced Ling Han to see those scenes, he wouldn't have known that he actually had a deep connection with Hysteria. Even so, he hadn't changed sides. Why would Hysteria trust him? This was a sly old fox who had lived for who knew how long. How could it trust others so easily? Ling Han deliberately put on an expression of indignation. "You don't trust me." Meng Dong hurriedly waved his hand. "Little brother, this is also for the sake of caution. After all, we're doing something world-shaking." Ling Han was only intentionally complaining. This was his normal reaction. He said, "All right, what's the mission this time?" Meng Dong shook his head. "It's not convenient to talk about it in detail here. Come with me." This guy was quite careful. Ling Han did not object and followed him. After walking for several days, they arrived at an abandoned, raw stone mine. Stone layers that had been cut were everywhere, and Meng Dong had constructed a simple formation with them that could completely cut off the divine sense of a heavenly venerate. Heavenly venerable stones had such an effect to begin with, so it was naturally safer to use them to set up a formation. "Wait a few days," said Meng Dong. Ling Han did not ask, and merely sat cross-legged. A few days later, a man suddenly appeared. "Let me introduce you. This is Brother Ba Duo," Meng Dong said as he pointed at this man, and then pointed at Ling Han. "This is Ling Han. Brother Ling, I've heard of your great name for a long time. When will you come and spar with me?" Ba Duo asked, his face full of fighting spirit. He was a third-tier heavenly venerate. For him to be chosen by Hysteria, or perhaps be affected by Hysteria's consciousness, meant that his strength should be extremely powerful, not weaker than Meng Dong's. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "All right. In a battle at equal cultivation level, Whom was he afraid of? Mang Dong hurriedly stopped the two from fighting, and smilingly said, "There's no hurry to spar. We're all brothers, and there are plenty of opportunities. It's more important to complete the Lord's mission." Only then did Ba Duo shut his mouth, but the way he looked at Ling Han was still filled with provocation. Ling Han naturally wouldn't shrink back, and similarly looked at the other party with a challenging gaze. If the other party dared to make a move, he would definitely knock the other party to the ground with a single punch, shattering all of his teeth. The mission this time is to send this thing into the core of the Flaming Frost Realm. Mang Dong finally revealed the specific content of the mission. He took out an item. It was a sphere that was flowing with a pitch-black luster and exuded an incomparably evil aura. Ling Han's eyes narrowed. "What is this?" "You only need to complete the mission. Don't ask what you shouldn't ask." Ba Duo immediately shouted. "Hey, hey, hey!" Mang Dong hurriedly waved his hand. "We're all family. Why can't he ask questions?" He chuckled. "This is something forged by our Lord. It has a strong corrosive effect on the dimensional core." He looked at Ling Han and continued, "As long as this thing is thrown into the core of the Flaming Frost Realm, it will greatly weaken the power of this realm, allowing our Lord to gain the upper hand in a dimensional clash." Ling Han was shocked. This move was truly vicious. The core of a dimension was the heart of a dimension. If it was corroded, it would greatly weaken the power of the dimension. Of course, it was also incomparably difficult to achieve this, especially against a transcendent dimension like the Flaming Frost Realm. Even 6th-tier elites would only be reduced to ashes if they tried to face it head-on. Could this thing really work? Ling Han didn't know if hysteria was testing him on purpose. Perhaps it didn't have the effect Mang Dong had mentioned at all. But what if it was true? Ling Han hesitated. Should he directly take down Mang Dong and Ba Duo and resolve this conspiracy against the Flaming Frost Realm? Or should he continue to feign civility and become a spy to find all of Hysteria's moles? It would be easy to take them out, but he would also lose this line. Furthermore, if this was really a test aimed at him, then it would be fine. If this thing really worked, then even if he resolved it this time, Hysteria would still be able to do it a second time and a third time. There would be a lot of people who could use it, and he wouldn't be the only one who could do it. Thinking of this, Ling Han nodded. Understood. Chapter 2900, 2900 Switch. Chapter 2900, 2900 Switch. 2900 Switch. All right, I'll leave this important matter to you. Mang Dong nodded and handed the thing in his hand to Ba Duo. This time the leader will be Ba Duo. A smug look appeared on Ba Duo's face. See, he was the one who was more trusted by the Lord. Ling Han was slightly surprised because it was obvious from Ba Duo's expression that he was wholeheartedly working for Hysteria and even found a sense of honor in it. He was already a heavenly venerate, so how could he have such thoughts? Heavenly venerates were high and mighty, and they had already transcended everything. However, Ba Duo was passionate about working for Hysteria, and would even become jealous over this. This was extremely unbelievable. Yes, it was a little like a few sons fighting for favor as they tried to please their father. All right, I wish you success in advance. I'll prepare a celebratory feast for you and wait for your return. Mang Dong smiled. Let's go, prodigy, Ba Duo said to Ling Han. Ling Han stepped forwards, and when he was close to Ba Duo, he suddenly threw a punch. Pum! Firstly, Ba Duo had not expected him to suddenly attack. Secondly, Ling Han's strength was much stronger than his. How could he possibly dodge? He directly fell to the ground, feeling dizzy, and was unable to get up immediately. Ling Han did not take advantage of the situation to push his advantage. Instead, he calmly said, "Watch your words. If it weren't for our Lord, I would have already killed you." Mang Dong originally wanted to make a move, but seeing that Ling Han didn't take any further action, and that Ba Duo was only beaten to the ground, he gave up on the idea of making a move. He said, Ling Han, we're all on the same side. Don't hurt the harmony between us. Ling Han chuckled and said, as long as no one is being despicable, I won't be overbearing either. Ba Duo finally recovered. He got up, and when he heard Ling Han's words, he was instantly enraged. Wasn't this just saying right to his nose that he had been asking for a beating? All right. Meng stopped him in time. Let's go. Don't delay our Lord's important matter. The corners of Bardo's mouth twitched, but he didn't say anything else. Instead, he turned around and left. Ling Han followed nonchalantly, and it wasn't until the two of them had disappeared that Meng Dong finally looked up at the sky and muttered, Little brother, are you guilty or innocent? This time, I should be able to test you. Ling Han followed Ba Duo, his pace neither too fast nor too slow. Actually, if he was allowed to travel freely, he could quickly transmigrate through the void. This was because the power in his body could reflect the various dimensions and allowed him to leap freely through the void. This was unlike Ba Duo, who could only reflect the flaming frost realm and had to advance in only one direction. The void was an extremely complicated space, and the shortest distance between 2 points was definitely not a straight line. Zhou Heng should be waiting for them in the flaming frost realm, Ling Han thought to himself. Previously, when he had sent Ba Duo flying with a slap, it was not for the simple purpose of venting his anger. Instead, he had seized the opportunity to send out a power of dimension, condensing it into a doppelganger that had hidden himself in the ground beneath Ba Duo. There was a large amount of stone layers here, and they could cut off the divine sense of heavenly venerable tier. As long as this doppelganger did not actively expose himself, Meng Dong and Ba Duo would not be able to notice anything amiss. After Meng Dong left, the doppelganger immediately went to look for Zhou Heng and told him the current situation. With a cultivation level of 6th tier, catching up to them was definitely not difficult. It wasn't that Ling Han couldn't deal with Ba Duo, but if he wanted Ba Duo to be knocked out without being able to even react, then he definitely didn't have the strength to achieve such a feat. After traveling through the void for thousands of years, they finally broke through the dimensional barrier and entered their destination, the flaming frost realm. Void energy surged out, but the power of dimension immediately repaired itself, cutting off the energy storm from the void. This created a huge impact, causing Ling Han's and Ba Duo's body to tremble, and they felt as if their bodies were being twisted. Right at this moment, an indescribable power struck Ba Duo, and he fainted before he could even react. Xiao! A figure flashed, and Zhou Heng appeared. Ling Han was not surprised at all, because it was precisely his doppelganger that had told Zhou Heng to lay in ambush here. If it were another heavenly venerate, it would definitely be impossible for them to achieve this. Only Ling Han, whose body was imbued with the powers of dimension, would be able to accurately calculate their exit location. Moreover, only an elite like Zhou Heng could do it, such that Ba Duo could not even react, because this was not as simple as killing him. Ling Han searched Ba Duo, retrieved the black sphere, and handed it to Zhou Heng. His body trembled, and he retracted the power of dimension he had sent out. Zhou Heng took the sphere and sensed it carefully. After a while, he revealed a solemn expression. There's indeed the power of hysteria inside. It has a huge corrosive effect. If it's really thrown into the dimensional core, it will severely weaken the flaming frost realm. Senior, can you replicate it? Ling Han asked. He didn't want to expose his identity just like that, so the best way was to do a switch and throw the forged item into the dimensional core. This way, he could still stay among Meng Dong and the others and probe the identities of others. At the same time, he wouldn't be weakening the flaming frost realm and helping them do evil. Zhou Heng shook his head. This is a power that is unique to hysteria. I am helpless too. Just as Ling Han was feeling disappointed, Zhou Heng said, However, I'll immediately make a trip to the realm battlefield and ask Master for help. He should be able to neutralize the corrosive effects within. He was a man of action, and immediately rushed to the realm battlefield. Meanwhile, Ling Han sat down on Ba Duo's body and used his own power to suppress him. Otherwise, how could it be possible to refrain from injuring Ba Duo and at the same time keep him unconscious? Fortunately, Zhou Heng returned in just over a month. He returned the black spear to Ling Han. The problem has been resolved. Ling Han nodded and placed the black spear back in its original spot on Ba Duo. Then he tore open space and re-entered the void. He calculated the position accurately and tore open the void again. Xiao! The two of them flew out. The power of dimension cut off the energy storm from the void, causing a violent tremor. Ba Duo immediately woke up. In his mind, it was still a month ago, so he naturally took a step forward and landed steadily on the ground. Ling Han was one step behind him and also stepped out. Ba Duo didn't have the slightest bit of suspicion. The reason why a sixth tier had personally made a move was to ensure that Ba Duo wouldn't notice anything. Ba Duo strode forward in large strides, heading toward the core of the dimension. Just over 10 days later, they arrived at their destination. This was actually still quite a distance away, and it was impossible to truly get close. This was the core of a transcendent dimension, and even a sixth tier could be killed by it, let alone a mere third tier. Ba Duo took out the black spear, glanced at Ling Han, and said, "I'm going to throw it in." Ling Han frowned and said, "Cut the crap. Are you asking for a beating?" Ba Duo was enraged, but he forcibly suppressed it and raised his right hand. Xiao, this black ball was thrown toward the dimensional core. Pum! It was impossible for the black ball to come close to the dimensional core at all, and it was immediately shattered by the tremendous force that surged around the dimensional core. However, a black aura surged from it, and it transformed into countless tentacles. Chapter 2901, 2901 Mission Complete. Chapter 2901, 2901 Mission Complete. 2901 Mission Complete. The power of dimension was extremely terrifying. Even if it was a super low-level dimension that could only produce first-tier heavenly venerates, it would require at least second-tier strength to destroy its dimensional core. In the past, the foreign realm had invaded the celestial realm, and it was precisely because it was deterred by the power of dimension that even heavenly venerates could not invade it. They could only rely on the foreign realm itself to suppress it and commence the realm war. Right now, the Flaming Frost realm was a transcendent dimension, and even sixth tiers would only be reduced to ashes should they face it head-on. Although seventh tiers were undying and indestructible, there was a limit to their power, and they, too, were unable to invade the core. However, it was Hysteria's doing this time. Endless black chi spread out like a net. However, there were small tentacles on the net that surrounded the dimensional core. The black chi couldn't be stopped or destroyed. It was extremely difficult to deal with. This was Hysteria, the most dangerous existence in history. The black chi descended slowly but incredibly steadily. In the end, it completely covered the dimensional core and sank into it. Instantly, the dimensional core trembled violently. Pung, pung, pung. Violent energy shot out from it, and its power was incomparably terrifying. Even Ling Han's expression changed. This could easily kill a fifth-tier elite. Without another word, he turned around and left. Ba Duo did not dare to stay any longer, either, and hurriedly left with Ling Han. Since the mission was completed, there was no point in staying here any longer. Xiao, Xiao! The two of them flew out of the ground layer. Ba Duo looked at Ling Han coldly and said, "I will find you for a battle." "Then why don't we do it now? I guarantee that you'll yield," Ling Han said casually. In his eyes, this Ba Duo was just a matter that could be resolved with a single punch. Humph. Ba Duo didn't reply. With a flash, he disappeared without a trace. Ling Han stood quietly. This time he could be considered to have completed Hysteria's mission and proven his allegiance. Next, he should be able to obtain the acceptance of Meng Dong and the others. From there, He would dig out all the traitors and eliminate them one by one. Hurry, hurry! He didn't want to waste time on such matters and affect his cultivation. He returned to the primitive overlapping dimension. After finding the Empress and Hunyao, he continued their expedition to explore for veins of ore. The gains here were huge, but no force had proceeded to set up a raw stone lane right now, because the cost of digging was too high, requiring a third-tier heavenly venerate to personally do it. They all directly mined and opened the stones immediately. This meant that Ling Han had one less channel to obtain treasure, but there was no other Grandmaster of raw stone that could enter this place. Ling Han was the only one. While others were randomly digging, he was purposeful and selective, so his gains were still far greater than others. Moreover, his current battle prowess was at the 5th tier, and when the combination seals displayed their might, he could even suppress the majority of 5th-tier elites. Naturally, this gave Ling Han a huge advantage in battle. There were more and more heavenly venerable seals in his possession, and from here onwards, the heavenly venerable seals were basically of the 8th grade. Could he collect another set of combination seals, a complete set of 8th grade seals? After excavating all the veins of ore in this dimension, Ling Han and the others headed towards the 7th dimension. However, even 3rd tiers could not pass through here. The flames formed by the friction and burning of fundamental particles could easily incinerate 3rd tiers into ashes, and even 4th tiers would have to go all out to resist the extreme heat. It was extremely tough even for the Empress and Hunyao, who managed to rely on their own strength to pass through the ground layer of the 6th dimension and enter into the 7th dimension. Here, there were naturally fewer people, and this dimension was smaller and more dilapidated. If there was only 1% of the 6th level left, then there would only be 1% of the 7th left. Ling Han was extremely careful. Right now, there were many people watching him, and as long as a few 5th tiers joined forces, they would be able to put him in a very tough situation. Furthermore, there were also 6th tiers as well. This was an existence that he absolutely could not match right now, and he could even be insta-killed. Tens of thousands of years later, this dimension was once again completely excavated. Thus, the battlefield shifted to the 8th dimension again. Here, only 5th tier elites could enter. Even the celestial guest residence was not very safe, so Ling Han had the Empress and Hunyao bring it with him. The two women directly returned to the 1st dimension, while Ling Han went deeper into the 8th dimension. This should also be the last dimension he could explore. Because one had to be at least a 5th tier to enter this place, the number of heavenly venerates had suddenly decreased to around 1,000, and no matter how dilapidated this plane was, it was still shockingly large, allowing every heavenly venerate to gain a lot. After 7,000 years, Ling Han decided to return because he had explored all the places that could be explored, and he had also tried to go to the next dimension, but he was completely unable to do so. The flames there could insta-kill 5th tiers, so there was no need to take such a huge risk. Ling Han also returned to the 1st dimension. After reuniting with the Empress and the others, he waited for news from Zhou Heng and the others. Another 3,000 years later, Zhou Heng and the others returned. Ling Han went to find out about the situation and learned that even a 6th tier could only stop at the 9th dimension. The 10th dimension could only be explored by a 7th tier, and no one knew if the 10th dimension was the end at all. There might even be an 11th, 101st, or infinite dimensions. Master and the other 7th tier grade elites already have some guesses, but they're currently fighting against the main body of Hysteria, so they can't free themselves to take a look at it personally, so they can't confirm which guess is correct, Chu Hao said. It's almost time for us to return as well. The value of this group of primitive dimensions lay in the raw stones. After the raw stones were all mined, what was the point of them staying here any longer? Yes, get ready. We should go back. Zhou Heng nodded. Everyone needed to prepare. Many people had come to the 1st dimension, including celestial kings, ascending origin tiers, and so on. They needed heavenly venerates to help them transmigrate through the void. Ling Han prepared to go into seclusion. Over the years, he had obtained many 8th grade seals. Although they had not formed a complete set, he had collected 3 super large combination talismans. One had 32 seals, another had 36 seals, and yet another had 40. There were a total of 1,108 of them. Ling Han was only 3 seals away from collecting the whole set. However, this wasn't the most terrifying part. Once the 8th grade seals were complete, they could be pieced together with the 9th grade seals to form an even more astonishing set of combination seals. Coincidentally, 2 of the 3 missing 8th grade seals would connect 2 sets of 8th grade combination seals, and the last one would connect the 9th and 8th grade combination seals. In other words, this was the first seal of the set of 8th grade seals. Should he slowly collect them from opening raw stones in the future? Ling Han shook his head. All the raw stones that could have been mined had already been mined. Even if some forces still had stockpiles, who would be willing to take them out? Moreover, would it just so happen that these 3 particular seals would be unearthed? He could either wait until he reached the 5th tier or even 6th tier, and then go deeper into the 10th and 11th dimensions. He believed that there would still be a large number of raw stones for him to complete this great sequence. However, this would take too long. Therefore, he planned to go into seclusion and deduce these 3 seals himself. Chapter 2902. 2902 Successful Deduction. Chapter 2902. 2902 Successful Deduction. 2902 Successful Deduction. This was not impossible because Ling Han already had the seal before and the seal after in the sequence, and he could use their resonance to deduce the middle one. Deducing Heavenly Venerable Seals was a compulsory course for elites with cultivation level of 3rd tier or higher, but if he imagined it without any reference, it would be too difficult to accomplish. The level of difficulty currently experienced by Ling Han was much lower. Furthermore, he also had the experience in repairing heavenly venerable seals. The might of millions and millions of powers of dimension within his body was definitely more beneficial than what other heavenly venerates had. However, before Ling Han went into seclusion, he had also heard quite a bit of news, such as that the Grand Masters of Raw Stone had suffered retribution, given that revenge was a dish best served cold. A large number of Grand Masters of Raw Stone had been killed, and the reason was that they had been too arrogant previously. Currently, Grand Masters of Raw Stone were trash, so which heavenly venerate would still care? In the past, you actually dared to show your dissatisfaction to the heavenly venerates, and in fact even ordered them around. Had you no idea what kind of existence a heavenly venerate was, even the heavens had to respect them. With the exception of a crafty old fox like Grand Master Xianlai, who knew how to conduct himself and was still living very comfortably, the group of Raw Stone Grandmasters had suffered a huge blow. Their rise to fame had been sudden, and their fall was also shockingly fast. In the end, relying on others to raise one's status wasn't reliable. Only one's own strength would truly matter. Ling Han shook his head and did not take it to heart. He began his seclusion. He observed his mind and activated the powers of dimension in his body. The 2 series of heavenly venerable seals glowed, and there was a faint connection between them. One set was 9th grade seals, while the other set was 8th grade seals. There was only a single seal missing in the middle to completely connect them together. This was the first thing Ling Han deduced. If he could produce this seal, then how terrifying would his boosted power be with that set of 9th grade seals and nearly 1/3 of the set of 8th grade seals. Wang, the infinite powers of dimension within his body shone, causing his mind to seemingly have become the void, illuminating the heavens. Streams of primal chaos, chi, gushed out from every cell and turned into a vast ocean around him. Every strand of primal chaos chi was extremely heavy. If not for Ling Han's existence, a single strand of primal chaos chi would be able to destroy a low-level dimension. Ling Han's mind was empty, but his enlightenment was as resplendent as fireworks. It made him feel as if he could see the birth and development of the entire Genesis world. The 6 fundamental powers were the foundation, they were everything, and the heavenly venerable seals were a tool that could communicate with the fundamental powers. It was unknown how many years had passed when Ling Han's body trembled, and he suddenly opened his eyes. There were no whites in his eyes, nor were there any black pupils. There was only an expanse of primal chaos, exuding a strange aura. It was not heavenly venerable tear, but it was definitely not weaker than the heavenly venerable tear. He jolted again and woke up from this strange state. A joyous expression appeared on his face. He had finally deduced the first 8th grade seal, and it radiated within his mind. Come, my super combination seals. 144 symbols were channeled at the same time. At first, Ling Han was filled with anticipation, but a look of bewilderment immediately appeared on his face. His strength increased by 262 times. That didn't seem right. His 8th grade combination seals could already increase his strength by 257 times. Then, further connected with the complete 9th grade combination seals, the increase in power should definitely exceed 300 times. Why was it so low? This was because the 9th grade seals couldn't be combined with the 8th grade seals, and it was as if one was just channeling irrelevant, heavenly venerable seals. No matter how many there were, only the most powerful heavenly venerable seal could be effective. In Ling Han's case, this was the most powerful set of combination seals displaying its might. This was strange. The heavenly venerable seal, he deduced, had to be correct. Otherwise, it would be impossible to increase the power of the 8th grade combination seals. But why couldn't it be combined with the 9th grade combination seals? Could it be that he needed a complete set of 8th grade combination seals? Ling Han decided to continue deducing. He only needed 2, and they both had adjacent heavenly venerable seals to resonate with, so deducing them was still not too difficult. He went into seclusion again. Time flew by, and it was unknown how many years had passed. Ling Han comprehended the second 8th grade seal and connected the original 2 sets of 8th grade seals together. The increase in power instantly exceeded 400 times. He didn't stop and continued to deduce the last 8th grade seal. Time was meaningless to him as once again countless years had passed, and Ling Han awakened for the 3rd time. 8th grade seals set complete. Come on, come on. Ling Han couldn't help but be filled with anticipation. This time it ought to work, right? He channeled all the 9th and 8th grade seals. All 222 heavenly venerable seals lit up in unison. Pung! The secret chamber where he was cultivating in seclusion immediately exploded, and a terrifying power shot into the sky, breaking through the sealed barrier of this dimension and piercing into the void. After the passing of so many years, there weren't many people left here, but there were some people who were still hopeful after all and were exploring. There might still be some raw stones left behind. However, at this moment, everyone felt a chill in their heart. Looking at the pillar of light soaring into the sky, everyone with cultivation level below the heavenly venerable tier knelt down, and even the heavenly venerates themselves felt their hearts race. The seals within their bodies were automatically channeled, cheering excitedly as if they wanted to submit to that pillar of light. A complete set of heavenly venerable seals surpassing a 1st grade seal was too terrifying. However, Ling Han was not happy, because he discovered that the 2 strings of heavenly venerable seals could not display their might at the same time. His power had increased by an astonishing 999 times, but this was the power of the 8th grade seals. The 9th grade seals were completely ineffective. How strange! He had already gathered all the 8th grade seals, so why couldn't he combine them with the 9th grade seals? Was it impossible to combine them at all? Or did he have to gather all the heavenly venerable seals before they could take effect? If it was the former, then there was no need to mention anything else. If it was the latter, then the time required to collect them would be unimaginably long, and in fact there might never be a day when this goal could be completed. Ling Han stopped channeling the heavenly venerable seals and slowly nodded. Lin Luo had divided all the heavenly venerable seals into 9 levels. It seemed that it wasn't just because of the difference in the increase in power, but also because they had their own characteristics. This was the only way to distinguish them. See, 8th grade seals were adjacent to 9th grade seals. They could resonate and sense each other, but they can't take effect at the same time. Ling Han had nothing to be dissatisfied with. He now possessed a complete set of 8th grade combination seals, and his power could be increased by nearly 1,000 times. This was too terrifying. Even if he were to encounter Xian Chihu again, he was confident that he could fight to his heart's content. Time to go out and take a look. When he came out of seclusion, the Empress and the others were already waiting for him, and the time they had been waiting had shockingly reached 30 billion years. Ling Han couldn't help but be shocked. He didn't seem to have spent much time, so how could 30 billion years be gone just like that? Let's return to the flaming frost realm, the Empress said gently. Have the others all returned? Ling Han asked. Yes, second brother, Jian Xue, and the others have already returned. The Empress nodded. After 30 billion years, her cultivation level had also reached the late stage of the 3rd tier, and such speed was already considered fast. After all, there was no longer any supply of great herbs. All right, we'll go back as well. Ling Han stretched out his hand, and all the women entered the celestial guest residence. Then he began to shuttle through the void. More than 10 years later, he returned to the flaming frost realm. Immediately, he received a message from Meng Dong. Logo. Chapter 2903. 2903, let's par. Chapter 2903. 2903, let's par. 2903, let's par. Meng Dong should indeed look for Ling Han. Back when Ling Han had completed the mission, there should have been a celebratory feast waiting for him. However, he was either busy mining or had gone into seclusion for a long time. It was impossible for Meng Dong to find him. Now that Ling Han had returned to the Flaming Frost realm, the latter had finally arrived. Ling Han also sent out a message in reply to Meng Dong. After a while, Meng Dong arrived. You've really made it difficult for me to find you. Meng Dong shook his head. 30 billion years had passed, and Meng Dong had already advanced to 4th tier. This speed was astonishing, and even if he was inferior to Xian Chihu and the others, he could also be considered a rarity himself. After all, in a certain sense, he was a creation of hysteria. Ling Han believed that Lu Xia Baduo and the others had also advanced to the 4th tier. Ling Han couldn't help but think of himself. After more than 30 billion years, he had actually only advanced a little bit. If the middle stage to the late stage of the 3rd tier was divided into 100 steps, then he would have taken about 10 steps, at most 12. At this speed, if he wanted to reach the peak stage of 3rd tier, he would really need a whole epoch. Ling Han sighed inwardly. Without the support of great herbs and refining of the life essence of heavenly venerates, his cultivation speed was truly low. And this was still because he had obtained more than 200 heavenly venerable seals, which increased his cultivation speed by nearly 1,000 times. Otherwise, how slowly would his cultivation progress? 1,000 epochs to advance to the next tier. Ling Han didn't even dare to think about it. If that was really the case, then he would have to cultivate until God knew when. It'd be a cold day in hell when he would advance to the 7th tier. Thus Ling Han thought to himself, but his expression didn't change. He nodded and said, I was in seclusion all this while and couldn't bother with anything else. Come, let me introduce you to a few brothers and sisters. Meng Dong smiled and did not waste any time on the previous topic. All right, Ling Han agreed. This was exactly what he wanted. Although Meng Dong had already advanced to the 4th tier, Ling Han did not take it to heart. Although Ling Han's cultivation level progressed slowly, it was only his cultivation level's increase that was slow. His strength was still rising at a terrifying rate, especially now that he had the complete set of 8th grade seals, which caused his strength to increase by nearly 1,000 times. Whom was he afraid of? Meng Dong led the way, while Ling Han followed behind. After traveling for several days, they arrived at a mountain range and then entered a cave. It actually had a powerful effect of cutting off divine sense. Ling Han took a closer look and saw heavenly venerable stone scraps all over the cave walls. These people were really careful, with these stone scraps blocking the sense of heavenly venerates. Even if the 7th tiers returned, they might not be able to discover them. Soon, the two of them arrived at a huge underground chamber. The space was huge, as if there was another world here. Meng Dong. There were 6 people standing or sitting cross-legged. When they saw Meng Dong, they all called out. Ling Han swept his gaze over them. He recognized 2 of them. They were naturally Lucia and Ba Duo. He didn't recognize the other 4 at all, but their cultivation level was 4th tier. No matter where they were placed, this group could be said to be extremely powerful. Come, let's get to know each other. This is Ling Han, our last awakened brother. Meng Dong patted Ling Han's shoulder. Ling Han nodded at these people and said, I've been looking forward to it for a long time. I've finally met all of you. Back then, he had seen Hysteria shoot out hundreds of light spots. Although most of them had been annihilated in the void, there were still more than 100 light spots that had entered various dimensions. Even if only half of them had matured, there should be about 50 of them now, far more than this number. The 4 people whom he didn't know also introduced themselves. They were Luo Ming, Yang Ke, Wu Jinyi, and Xiaoying. All of them were very arrogant. This was a kind of sense of superiority that originated from their advantage in cultivation level. Ling Han, I heard that your tier-surpassing battle prowess was extremely formidable, and I would like to spar with you, Xiaoying said. Their hostility was so great, and Xiaoying already wanted to challenge Ling Han right from the start. Ling Han glanced at Ba Duo. This guy was also full of fighting spirit. It was obvious that he felt that he had reached a higher level, and was now qualified to challenge Ling Han. Sure. Ling Han nodded, appearing very indifferent. Unless his opponent was Xan Chihu, it would be really difficult for him to have much interest. His perfunctory attitude naturally made Xiaoying very dissatisfied, but he didn't say anything. A cold smile appeared on his lips. His strength was not a mere boast. It was a result of genuine battles. Come and fight. He soared into the air. The space here was extremely large, and with a little control, it absolutely could allow heavenly venerates to battle. Ling Han paced into the air one step after another, put his left hand behind his back, and then hooked his right hand. Make your move. Xiaoying was even more dissatisfied. How much do you look down on me? He let out a long howl and charged towards Ling Han. His hands turned into hammers, which he smashed towards Ling Han. Being chosen by Hysteria, each of them was a super genius. Even at 4th tier, they had a certain level of tier-surpassing battle prowess. For example, Xiaoying was only in the early stage of the 4th tier, but his battle prowess had reached the peak of the 4th tier. It was truly astonishing. It was unknown if this guy had nurtured a small world in his body, or if he had collected a lot of powers of dimension. Prior to reaching 6th tier, there was actually not much difference. The more powers of dimension he harvested, the stronger it would be as compared to the power of a small world. However, if he only harvested 10 to 20 powers of dimension, he would soon be surpassed by the power of a small world. Ling Han appeared nonchalant and only returned Xiaoying's punch when it arrived. Pum! The power of his fist was too terrifying. When Ling Han punched out, endless primal chaos chi surged, and Xiaoying's attack power was instantly shattered. However, Ling Han did not take advantage of his victory to push his advantage. Instead, he stopped the force of his fist in time and smiled faintly at Xiao Ying. The more polite he acted, the angrier Xiao Ying became. This was because this was simply a blatant disregard in Xiao Ying's eyes. Xiao Ying roared. Wang. He had already channeled a heavenly venerable seal. In an instant, he seemed to have transformed into a god, exuding a powerful aura that suppressed the heavens. First-grade seal. With a shake of his hands, his arms turned purple-golden, and strange, veined patterns appeared on them. He charged out, brandishing his arms as he swept them at Ling Han. Ling Han raised his hand to receive it head-on. Pung, he felt his arm shake, and he actually felt as if it was about to break apart. Although a heavenly venerate's body was tempered by fundamental power, and it would seem as if one gained an indestructible body made of devouring metal at great accomplishment when one advanced to the 7th tier, the body could never be compared to devouring metal prior to that point. However, Xiao Ying's arms gave Ling Han a feeling that this was simply a heavenly venerate tool. If he could cultivate his physique to such an extent at 4th tier, then apart from a 7th tier, could anyone else hurt him? Utterly impossible. Ling Han immediately shook his head. He dusted off his hands to dispel the numbness in his arms, and then suddenly said, "You refine the devouring metal into your body. No wonder your arms are so strong. It's not just the arms." Xiao Ying sneered, and his figure pounced forward, launching a fierce attack at Ling Han. An ancient and aged veined pattern appeared on every part of his body. Chapter 2904 2904 Setup. Chapter 2904 2904 Setup. 2904 Setup. It wasn't just the arms. Every part of Xiao Ying's body was infused with devouring metal, making his physique incomparably powerful. He was completely unrestrained as he violently attacked Ling Han. Such a concept was very simple, but even a 6th tier heavenly venerate would not be able to do this. It seemed that it was because of hysteria that he possessed such a bizarre ability. Ling Han's power naturally far surpassed Xiao Ying's. He casually attacked, and Xiao Ying was sent flying. There was no need for direct contact at all. Under the suppression of his overwhelming power, this was too easy for him. It was just like how an ordinary person wouldn't be able to shatter a rock with a punch, as that would have caused them to injure their own fist instead. However, it would be a piece of cake for them to throw this rock away. Xiao Ying laughed loudly. "Is that all you have?" Although he was continuously sent flying by Ling Han, he was completely unharmed. Ling Han was speechless. Exactly whose cultivation level was higher? "You are treated like a punching bag by me, yet you still have a smug look on your face. Where does this sense of superiority come from?" Ling Han didn't know where to start even if he wanted to ridicule him. We're all family. There's no need to fight for real. Meng Dong tried to mediate. That's right, Lucia said as well. Everyone was trying to mediate the fight, so Ling Han and Xiao Ying naturally couldn't continue fighting. "Let's fight again next time." Xiao Ying was full of fighting spirit. "Whatever," Ling Han said calmly. Come, let's drink." Meng Dong smiled and called out to everyone. The 8 of them sat down and began to drink. All creations in the world were the result of the manifestation of regulations, and it was the same even for celestial king-tier great herbs. Thus, there was no wine that could make a heavenly venerate become drunk. They would absolutely be unaffected, all right? However, when Ling Han took a sip of this wine, he actually felt a wave of dizziness. He was a little puzzled. Are you surprised?" Meng Dong said with a smile, "This is wine refined from supremely valuable medicine. Of course, it also has an effect on heavenly venerates." So that was the case indeed. Ling Han chuckled and continued to savor the wine, but did not swallow it. These people were all Hysteria's subordinates. Even if he had already made his way into the inner workings of the enemy camp, he still had to be careful. After all, even if these 7 people didn't intend to harm him, if they were related to hysteria. How could this wine be consumed? Ling Han only swallowed a little bit of the wine, but the power of dimension within his body immediately started to be frantically channeled, grinding this tiny bit of effect of the wine. Instantly, the dizziness disappeared, turning into some incomparably pure power that increased his cultivation level. Ling Han wasn't sure if this was wine refined from supremely valuable medicine, but it was indeed effective in increasing one's cultivation level. Seeing that the power of dimension in his body was so awesome, Ling Han no longer controlled it and began to drink in large mouthfuls. Hong, the power in his body surged, making him feel extremely comfortable. Drink! Meng Dong and the others also toasted repeatedly. Brother, you and Ba Duo made a great contribution last time, and we haven't organized a celebratory feast for you. This time, it's not only a welcome ceremony for you, but also a celebratory feast. Come, drink. Everyone kept urging him to drink, and Ling Han didn't refuse any of them. Very quickly, he appeared to be drunk. As Meng Dong and the others urged Ling Han to continue drinking, cold smiles gradually appeared on their faces. Little brother, you really disappoint us, Lu CS suddenly said. What do you mean? Ling Han shook his head in a daze. Do you really think that after tampering with our Lord's sphere, our Lord won't be aware of it at all? Meng Dong said coldly. Ling Han was shocked. Hysteria actually knew that its sphere had been tampered with and could no longer corrode the flaming frost realm. This was impossible. After all, they were separated by a whole dimension. How did Hysteria sense it? To say that Hysteria had seen through it because there was not much effect on the flaming frost realm was actually not reliable. This was because even if the dimension was weakened, it would still take a period of an epoch to show any effects. What was a mere 30 billion years? It seemed that he had truly underestimated Hysteria's ability. In other words, he had not passed the loyalty test to Hysteria, and now he was going to be punished. Nonsense, you're completely slandering me, Ling Han said in a slurred tone. Hee, you still want to prevaricate at a time like this? Lu Xie said coldly. Don't waste your breath on him. Just kill him. Ba Duo shouted. He hated Ling Han the most. Back then, he had been knocked to the ground by Ling Han with a single punch, and this was a great humiliation to him. Meng Dong waved his hand. There's no hurry. There's a trace of our Lord's true energy in this wine. Even if our little brother's abilities are heaven-defying, it's still impossible for him to rival it. But don't worry, little brother. This trace of true energy won't do any harm to your body. Instead, it'll allow your cultivation level to improve greatly. It's just that. Ba Duo couldn't help but interrupt. You'll sleep for a long time. I know you're strong, so to be safe, I even used our Lord's true energy on you. You're really fortunate. Luo Ming gave a fake smile. None of them were reluctant, because they all had the ability to absorb the life essence of heavenly venerates and convert it into their own power to increase their cultivation level. Thus, even after Ling Han absorbed their Lord's true power, this energy would still return to them once he was killed. Of course, there would definitely be some losses, but to be able to get rid of a traitor with heaven-defying abilities like Ling Han, the small price was naturally worth it. They weren't in a hurry. Currently, Ling Han was only drunk, but he would soon fall into a deep slumber. That would make it even easier for them to get rid of him. The 7 of them all looked at Ling Han with smirks on their faces, anticipating to see Ling Han reveal an expression of anger, defiant but helpless. This would make all the pores on their bodies to be opened. However, Ling Han's next action caused the corners of their mouths to twitch. This was because he reached out and snatched the wine pot, directly gulping it down in large mouthfuls. Fuck, do you think you're not dying fast enough? Meng Dong and the others were speechless. How could there be such a person? Was he out of his mind, or was it a vicious cycle where he would get drunk to death first? Snatch it. Meng Dong was the first to react. Ling Han had already drunk enough wine, and it would be a waste to let him drink any more. This was because even if they could refine Ling Han's life essence, there was still a problem with the conversion rate, and there would be losses. The 7 of them hurriedly moved to snatch the wine pot. However, even though Ling Han was drunk, shaking his head and looking as if he could collapse at any moment, he managed to avoid all the attacks of the 7 people just by swaying back and forth like this while still gulping down large mouthfuls of wine. Meng Dong and the others were so anxious that their eyes turned red. Every time Ling Han drank an extra mouthful, how great of a waste would that be? Previously, they hadn't felt heartache because that was the price they had to pay in order to take Ling Han down. However, that wasn't the case now. Put down the wine pot. Meng Dong roared as he continued to attack. Ling Han said slurringly, "Why should I put it down? Who do you think you are? I just want to drink to my heart's content." Chapter 2905 2905 Fusion. Chapter 2905 2905 Fusion. 2905 Fusion. The more Meng Dong and the others fought, the more they felt it was strange. Could it be that Ling Han was really drunk and completely confused about the situation? It was really hard to believe. If he wasn't a drunkard, why would he be so greedy for wine at this time? They attacked with all their might, wanting to apprehend Ling Han, but they were unable to take him down no matter how hard they tried. Gulp, gulp. Ling Han shook the wine pot hard and discovered that it was already empty. He couldn't help but sigh. It was only a little bit. It was really too little. Ling Han swept his gaze over Meng Dong and the others. "All right, I'll play with you." When he said this, he was no longer drunk at all. You're not drunk." Seeing that Ling Han was so sober, Meng Dong and the others were all shocked. How could this be possible? There was a trace of their lord's power inside, and it was definitely not something that Ling Han could dissolve. However, Ling Han was not affected in the slightest. How could they understand or accept this? "You didn't drink it?" Baduo asked. This was also possible. With the strength of a heavenly venerate, he could absolutely pretend to drink and send the wine into another space to temporarily preserve it in reality. Ling Han shrugged and said, "Why should I tell you?" The 7 of them were speechless. They had already fallen out with each other, so Ling Han naturally had no obligation to tell them the reason. Ling Han chuckled and said, "However, there's no harm in telling you. Actually, this is a trap set up by our Lord. The true traitors we want to capture are actually one or several among all of you." As soon as this remark came out, Meng Dong and the others were skeptical. It was absolutely impossible for them to believe that Ling Han could neutralize their lord's methods. In that case, could it be that there really was a traitor among them? This time it was actually a trap within a trap, and they were the ones being tested. Of course, they themselves all knew that they were innocent, but how could they guarantee that the other 6 would be the same? "Don't believe his nonsense," Meng Dong immediately said. "This kid is just lying to us. His goal is to disrupt our fighting spirit." Not bad. Lu Xia and the others instantly became apprehensive. They couldn't fall for Ling Han's evil tricks. They no longer hesitated, and all of them used their full strength to suppress Ling Han. Xiao Ying charged at the very front. He was confident that his defense was invincible and was definitely not something Ling Han could break through. Ling Han laughed coldly and said, "Do you really think that I can't break your turtle shell?" He gathered all his strength and suddenly threw a punch. Pum! The power of the punch turned into a point and hit Xiao Ying's body, immediately blasting a hole in his chest and causing blood to spurt out wildly. Meng Dong and the others were all astounded. Ling Han's power was too terrifying. With just a punch from afar, he had torn Xiao Ying's defenses apart. Ling Han took advantage of the victory to push his advantage, and with 3 punches and 2 kicks, Xiao Ying was knocked to the ground. Previously, Ling Han hadn't used his full strength at all. under the suppression of absolute power. What was this incomplete, heavenly venerate, treasured physique? When Meng Dong and the others saw this, all of their hearts turned cold. They had already overestimated Ling Han's strength, so not only did they use tricks, but they also mobilized a total of 7 people, all for the sake of making sure that nothing went wrong. Who would have thought that the wine would be ineffective and that Ling Han's battle prowess would completely crush theirs? Wang, Wang, Wang. They all channeled first-grade, heavenly venerable seals, each of them different. They subsequently pressed down upon Ling Han, determined to save Xiao Ying no matter what it took. Ling Han stamped his foot down on Xiao Ying, but using this force he bounced forth, heading straight for Ba Duo. Haven't you always wanted to spar with me? Come, I'll let you get what you want. Meng Dong and the others all roared in anger. Ling Han's foot directly crushed Xiao Ying's head, and once his mind was broken, that heavenly venerate would also die. Pang, pang, pang. Ling Han threw 11 consecutive punches. How could Ba Duo be worthy of contending against him? In an instant he exploded, turning into a rain of blood. The 6 of them had the ability to absorb life essence and transform it into their own energy. Therefore, after Xiao Ying and Ba Duo died, this energy floated toward the 6 of them. Although no one could detect it, in reality, the amount that Ling Han had obtained was a little more than the total amount of these 5 people combined. Ling Han unleashed his might, blasting Meng Dong and the others away while snatching over Xiao Ying and Ba Duo's remnant souls. He could use these to extract their heavenly venerable seals. Furthermore, he also wanted to pluck their souls to obtain more information about Hysteria. For example, who were the rest of these people's accomplices? Then he turned around and said calmly, "Who's next?" Meng Dong and the others were all shocked. In just 1 or 2 moves, 2 of their companions had been killed by Ling Han. Then, so what if they still had 5 people? It would just take Ling Han a few more moves to be finished with them. Escape. Could they escape? Ling Han's strength was crushing them. This was not a battle between equals at all. For the main body, Meng Dong suddenly shouted, his eyes filled with madness. For the main body, Lu Xie and the other 3 also roared. All of them seemed to have turned into lunatics. Xiao, 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 they leaped to the side. Everyone's entire body glowed, and they actually strangely fused together. Although I'll die today, I'll only be returning to my original body, the 5 of them said. Boom! A ball of incomparably blazing light flashed, and all 5 of them disappeared. In their place was an indescribable creature. It looked a little like an octopus. It had many tentacles all over its body, but it also had a human face. When the human face split open, it turned out to be a huge mouth. Its entire body was pitch black and emitted an incomparably evil aura. This was Hysteria. No, Ling Han immediately shook his head. Hysteria was far more powerful than this, and the monster in front of him was at most at the 5th tier. The difference was too great. How did these 5 people become such a monstrous creature? The power of Hysteria was definitely a contributing factor. Otherwise, how could the 5 of them have fused together? He had never heard of 2 heavenly venerates being able to fuse as one, let alone 5 of them. Since you forced me to this point, I'll drag you down with me, the monster said. Its voice was very complicated, as if many people were speaking together, but they were surprisingly united. The monster attacked. Shua, a tentacle swung out, sweeping towards Ling Han. There was a heavenly venerable seal glowing on its body, boosting its power by more than 80 times. It was a first-grade seal. Meng Dong and the others should each have a first-grade seal. Now that the 5 of them had fused together, even if these 5 first-grade seals could not be combined, they could still take turns to display their might. Ling Han met it with a punch. Pung! The fist and the tentacle collided, instantly setting off a terrifying energy storm. In an instant, this huge cave was destroyed. Hong, long, large, and small pieces of rubble fell, creating a huge commotion. Damn it, you forced me to use this move. I only have 3 days left to live. If I don't slash your corpse into pieces, the hatred in my heart won't be appeased, the monster said as it attacked aggressively. After being boosted with a first-grade seal, its current strength had already completely surpassed Ling Han's and had reached the stage of crushing him. Ling Han shook his head and said, "So you think you won just like that?" Chapter 2906, 2906 Beaten Until Bursting. Chapter 2906, 2906 Beaten Until Bursting. 2906 Beaten Until Bursting. Meng Dong and the others fused together and transformed into a miniature hysteria. Swoosh, 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 swoosh. Its entire body was covered in tentacles that lashed out like whips one after another with astonishing momentum. It had been enhanced with a first-grade seal, and the 5 of them had fused together, so its power had naturally skyrocketed, at the cost of sacrificing the endless lifespans of heavenly venerates. Its strength experienced an inconceivable increase. Swish, swish, swish. Tentacles lashed out, bringing endless darkness and evil. To this space, it was like a calamity. Ling Han was also enhanced with a first-grade seal, and then he fought head-on with the fusion monster. Pum, pum, pum. In the intense battle, both sides ended up in a draw. Ling Han was secretly astonished. One had to know that even if 5 fourth tiers joined forces, even if all of them were at the peak stage of the 4th tier, it was still impossible for them to push their power to the 5th tier. However, not only did these 5 people achieve this, they had also reached the middle stage of the 5th tier and were not inferior to him at all. As expected of a creation of hysteria, having all kinds of special abilities. Ling Han, you only have 1 first-grade seal, and that can only last for 2 hours. At that time, let's see what other methods you have to fight me, the fusion body roared. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "Don't celebrate too early." He wanted to see just what kind of ability a creation of hysteria would possess, so he didn't unleash his battle prowess to the extreme. Instead, he focused on countering the other party's move one after another. However, after going back and forth for 2 hours, the fusion body still didn't have any new moves, much to his disappointment. "It's time for you to die," Meng Dong's fusion body shouted as he channeled another Heavenly Venerable Seal. This was also a first-grade Heavenly Venerable Seal, and enhanced its power by more than 80 times, allowing its battle prowess to remain unchanged. As for Ling Han, he only had 1 first-grade seal, and it would be gone once the energy release was over. Die. The fusion body opened its huge mouth and countless weapons instantly gushed out, turning into raindrops that slashed towards Ling Han. Now, this secret technique was executed with the battle prowess of the 5th tier, and with the first-grade seal amplifying its power by more than 80 times. Its might was incomparably terrifying. Ling Han shook his head, and all the 8th-grade seals lit up at the same time, illuminating the heavens within his body one. Hung! His power soared by 1,000 times. Pum! He only threw a simple punch, but the weapons that were attacking him were completely shattered at the same time. The power of his fist did not diminish at all, and it continued to surge forward at an extremely fast speed. The fusion body didn't even have time to react before a large hole was blasted open in its chest, and black blood gushed out uncontrollably. It wanted to speak, but it couldn't utter a single word. Pa pa pa! The tentacles on its body fell off one after another, followed by flesh and blood, which soon scattered into bloody mud all over the ground. Under Ling Han's punch, its whole body was already shattered. That was a power enhancement of 1,000 times. At the 5th tier, Ling Han would definitely be capable of killing anyone in his way. However, the fusion body's spirit did not immediately dissipate, turning into a final wave of attack that surged towards Ling Han. This attack was too fast, Ling Han had only just reacted when this attack wave had already rushed into his mind, intending to cause great destruction and destroy his will. However, without any initiative on his part, the millions and millions of powers of dimension in his body automatically channeled at the same time, turning into millstones that could crush anything. The impact from this divine sense attack was very strong. It was originally strong enough to pierce through a fifth tier's mind, but after being crushed by the millstone, the shock wave split into millions and millions of small fragments and then completely shattered. There was no longer the slightest threat. Meng Dong and the others let out unwilling wails, but they couldn't reverse the inevitable outcome and dissipated one after another. Ling Han made his move, wanting to capture their remnant souls. However, he discovered that a black shadow had risen from their blood and had transformed into hysteria again. However, it was smaller, only the size of a fist, yet the aura it emitted was incomparably terrifying. Even Ling Han couldn't help but stop in his tracks and cease his movements. This still couldn't be the main body of hysteria, but it was very likely a projected doppelganger that had temporarily descended with the blood essence of Meng Dong and the others. However, hysteria did not make a move. It only stared at Ling Han and waved its countless tentacles. Hung! It suddenly dissipated and vanished into thin air. Only then did Ling Han heave a sigh of relief. It would be strange if he wasn't nervous in the face of this most ferocious creature in all of history. Oh no, I've been tricked! He suddenly reacted and reached out to grab at the air. However, he missed because the remnant souls of Meng Dong and the others had completely disappeared. Only then did he realize why Hysteria's doppelganger hadn't made a move. It was impossible for the other party to make a move. It was just an empty shell that had frightened him. And why did it do that? It was naturally to prevent him from seizing the souls of Meng Dong and the others and reading their secrets, including the heavenly venerable seals and the identities of the other survivors. Fuck! Ling Han gritted his teeth. He had always been the one to scare others, but he had unexpectedly been tricked by hysteria this time. He felt that it was a pity. He could have gotten 5 more first-grade seals. 5! A whopping 5 of them. Moreover, these 5 people actually didn't contribute any life essence. Is this because of the appearance of hysteria's consciousness, or was it due to the fusion of these 5 people? Forget it, at least I obtained 2. Moreover, I should be able to read the information of the other survivors from these 2 people. Ling Han began to refine the remnant souls of Xiao Ying and Ba Duo, extracting what he needed from them. As for the heavenly venerable seals, it went very smoothly. He quickly obtained 2 first-grade seals, as well as a number of 9th and 8th-grade seals. He left out the duplicates and sealed them in heavenly venerable stone scraps. However, the list of remaining survivors left Ling Han somewhat speechless. This was because the list obtained from the 2 of them was completely different. Moreover, there were as many as 200 people on each list, including people like Zhou Heng and Chu Hao. All of them had become traitors. Of course, this was impossible. In other words, these people had already made preparations for this. Even if they died, it would be impossible for others to obtain any useful information through a soul search of their remnant souls. If they were to hunt according to these 2 lists, there might really be a few hysteria moles among them, but the majority of them were innocent people. At that time, the entire world would be in chaos, and the number of heavenly venerates would also wither to an unbelievable extent. Ling Han shook his head. He also gave up on taking Xiao Ying and Ba Duo's first-grade seals for himself. He was already powerful enough, and the Empress and Hunyou lacked high-level heavenly venerable seals. Thus, he planned to let the 2 women master these 2 seals. The 2 women came out of the celestial guest residence. After hearing what Ling Han said, they didn't stand on ceremony, and each took 1 heavenly venerable seal. Then they proceeded to enter into seclusion in the celestial guest residence to refine them. Ling Han set off again to find Zhou Heng and the others. Chapter 2907, 2907 The Realm Battlefield Reopens. Chapter 2907. 2907 The Realm Battlefield Reopens. 2907 The Realm Battlefield Reopens. After so many years, most of the heavenly venerates had already returned to the Flaming Frost Realm and continued to do whatever they should be doing. However, the previous situation had already stabilized, and the strength of the various forces was about the same. Very few forces took the initiative to start a war, because this might allow a third party to reap the benefits. The entire world might not be peaceful now, but there were basically no large-scale wars. It was as if they had arrived at a golden age of cultivation. Although the competition was incomparably intense, the overall environment was good. Ling Han returned to the Lin clan's ancestral grounds and asked to meet Lin Xiaoyang and the others. He explained what had happened previously, which made Lin Xiaoyang and the other two feel extremely shocked. Hysteria's creations can actually fuse together? This has never happened before. This should be a special case. Otherwise, we would have seen it on the realm battlefield long ago. Yes, even with Hysteria's methods, it has only nurtured more than 100 people after so many years. This shouldn't be enough to become a catastrophe. After the 3 6th-tier elites had a serious discussion, they felt that there was no need to be too vigilant. When they heard that they themselves were actually remnants of Hysteria as well, they couldn't help but laugh. This Hysteria was really trying to drive a wedge between them. Ling Han chatted with Zhou Heng and the other two for a long time. The 3 elites were all very warm to him and looked forward to his future achievements. Ling Han then left and returned to his Ling city. The large black dog, the karmic life, heavenly venerable Ji Wuming, and the others had returned a long time ago. Their strength had all improved greatly. After all, that lost dimension had too many opportunities. For example, Ji Wuming and Hua Ferong had already advanced to the 3rd tier, and even the large black dog had advanced to the 2nd tier, while Ling Han himself had yet to advance. This made him sigh ruefully that the heavens were really blind. What do you mean by the heavens being blind? Grandpa Dog was born to be wise and mighty and decide the world on his own terms, the large black dog boasted shamelessly. If the heavens don't take it well, Grandpa Dog will slaughter the heavens. In the end, Ling Han kicked him into a ditch. The current situation was extremely harmonious. Everyone cultivated, and when they were bored, they would discuss cultivation. It was as if the world was truly at peace. However, it didn't take long before someone came looking for trouble. This was a 6th-tier heavenly venerate, Yu Qingwang's father, Yu Borong. In the past, Yu Qingwang had died at Ling Han's hands. After Yu Borong learned of the news, he would definitely want to take Ling Han down and avenge his son's death. It was just that everyone had been searching for raw stone mines at the time, and that was too important. An elite like Yu Borong was able to take things as they came, so he naturally knew which to prioritize. Moreover, there were multiple dimensions there, and it was extremely difficult to find a person there. Yu Borong naturally wouldn't waste time. Now that the outcome had been decided, Yu Borong naturally had a lot of time and wanted to avenge his son. However, Zhou Heng and the other two were filled with anticipation for Ling Han now. How could they hand him over? Yu Borong was very domineering. He threatened that if Zhou Heng and the other two did not hand Ling Han over, a war would inevitably break out. With how Zhou Heng and the other two could reach the 6th tier, they naturally had experienced and gone through countless storms. How could they be intimidated by such a threat? They had no fear. Should you wish to fight, then you would get the war that you wanted. Both sides were on the verge of a fight. Both sides summoned a large number of people to confront each other at the outermost perimeter of the Lin clan's ancestral grounds. However, in the instant that the great battle was about to erupt, all 6th-tier elites on both sides revealed expressions of rapt attention. After a long while, they all revealed shocked expressions. "Go back," Yu Borong immediately said. He waved his hand, and his subordinates immediately retreated like a tide. Why did they suddenly stop fighting? Ling Han naturally couldn't stay out of this. He had been standing at the side the entire time and was also very confused now. This formation had already been set up so fiercely, and all that was left was for the big shots of both sides to wave their hands and then start a bloodbath. However, they actually retreated at a time like this. How strange. Lin Xiaoyang opened his mouth and said with a boom, "I just received a message from the 7th tiers. The energy storm in the realm battlefield is rapidly dissipating, and it's very likely that it will stabilize within 1,000,000,000 years." What? When everyone heard this, they were all shocked. The realm battlefield was about to reopen. Didn't they say that the energy storm would last endlessly? Why did they suddenly say that it would disappear in 1,000,000,000 years? One shouldn't think that 1,000,000,000 years was very long. To heavenly venerates, they might not even be able to take a small step forward in their cultivation with this little amount of time. When seen from that perspective, 1,000,000,000 years was really very short. Furthermore, once the energy storm was gone, the Hysteria's army would definitely make a comeback. They had to immediately set up the city defenses. Otherwise, if they went to face the Hysteria's army that had been accumulating for hundreds of billions of years, they would definitely suffer heavy losses. Why? How was that possible? Back then, when the energy storm was raging, even the 7th tiers were certain that this sort of situation would most likely continue forever. But now, just how long had it been? Not even a single epoch had passed. Everyone was at a loss. Were they going back to face that terrifying Hysteria's army again? This caused many people to feel at a loss, and an aversion to war arose among them. There was a saying that it was easy to become extravagant when one was frugal, but it was difficult to go from extravagant to frugal. Similarly, just how many people would still have a willpower as firm as iron when they were used to being at ease and had to enter that bloody and cruel war? But what could they do? Every person knew that everyone would die if Hysteria successfully invaded. Many people began to wonder if the energy storm back then had been a scheme created by Hysteria to let them get used to ease and disintegrate their fighting spirit. It had even made them kill each other, greatly weakening their strength. Zhou Heng and the other two had naturally guessed this long ago, but they had not expected that this day would have come so quickly. They had thought that there would be a buffer period of 1 or 2 epochs. Fortunately, the discovery of the primitive dimension had made the surviving heavenly venerates much stronger. This was good news. But at the same time, there was also a piece of bad news. Extremely bad news. So many years of killing each other had planted the notion that others were unreliable in the hearts of every heavenly venerate. How could they still trust their comrades and leave their backs to others? But no matter what, this was a battle that they had to face. All the 6th tier elites took action, bringing the remaining heavenly venerates to the realm battlefield. As expected, the energy storm was rapidly dissipating like an ebbing tide. Even though this battlefield was incomparably huge, if the energy storm was ebbing on both sides at the same time, it would only take about 1,000,000,000 years for the energy storm to completely disappear. At that time, the Hysteria's army would be able to charge over from the other side. Forward. We need to keep the front line as far forward as possible. The energy storm retreated and they advanced. Soon, they arrived at the place where space overlapped. Previously, this place had been divided into 8 levels, corresponding to the 8 cultivation levels from the pseudo-heavenly venerable tier to 7th tier. Although 7th tier could also enter the first spatial level, their battle prowess would be suppressed, and they would be unable to unleash their full strength. This was the realm war, and the Genesis world determined the rules of the battle. Even 7th tiers had to follow the rules of the game. However, when everyone arrived, they discovered that the space here had been severely damaged. Chapter 2908. 2908 Ling, she returns. Chapter 2908. 2908 Ling, she returns. 2908 Ling, she returns. This is different. Other people have opened their doors, and establish their respective forces. Their clothes have clear signs on them, making it obvious at a glance, he said. Let's get a uniform set of clothes too. Let others see that we're from the Ling Alliance, and they won't dare to provoke us. Woof, woof, woof. Grandpa Dog was almost slaughtered a few days ago and made into braised dog meat. Look, Grandpa Dog's tail is bald. The large black dog turned around, and his tail was seen poking out of his iron underwear. It was completely bald. Ling Han laughed loudly and said, "Haven't you always been very slippery? How did you end up in such a miserable state? Brat, Grandpa Dog was about to be killed by someone, and you're still laughing?" The large black dog stomped his paws, fuming. Ling Han nodded and said, "All right, we'll also form an alliance here and officially establish a force." They acted resolutely and immediately began to make preparations. They announced the establishment of the Ling Alliance, with Ling Han as the alliance leader. The heavenly venerates in the alliance included the Empress Hunyo, the Rain Emperor, Karmic Life Heavenly Venerable, the large black dog, Ling Jinxue, Ling Fifan, Ji Wuming, Hua Furong, Shi Chanzi, Yi, and so on. There weren't many heavenly venerates, but with Ling Han holding down the fort, this was a powerful banner. After hundreds of thousands of years, Ling Shi and Fu Tianqing returned. Contrary to Ling Han's expectations, Fu Tianqing had not only advanced to the heavenly venerable tier, but had also in fact advanced to the third tier in one go. In terms of cultivation level, he was already not inferior to his master, and Ling Shi was not far behind either and had similarly advanced to the third tier. This made Ling Han sigh ruefully. The new generation surpassed the old. His daughter's strength was within his expectations, but he did not expect that this disciple who had been abducted by his daughter would also be so freakish. It was as if he had the intention of catching up to him. Of course, Ling Shi and Fu Tianqing had only caught up in terms of cultivation level. When it came to strength in a battle between equals, no one could compare to Ling Han. Like Ling Shi, Fu Tianqing also contained a small world formed from the collision of two dimensions. As long as he continued to grow stronger, his future would be limitless. It was very likely that he would become another Xian Chihu and Wu Haoyang. The return of these two people greatly increased the strength of the Ling Alliance. Ling Shi and Fu Tianqing were also in love with each other and were preparing to get married. When Ling Han found out, he almost couldn't resist killing Fu Tianqing. Chapter 2909 2909 Wedding and Assault. Chapter 2909 2909 Wedding and Assault. 2909 Wedding and Assault. Of course, this was only an idea. Firstly, Ling Shi would definitely not have it, and secondly, Ling Han could not bring himself to kill Fu Tianqing. After all, he was a disciple that he had personally taught. However, when Ling Han thought about how his daughter, such a delicate flower, was about to be stolen by that brat, Ling Han couldn't help but feel furious. No matter how he looked at Fu Tianqing, he was still displeased. He reluctantly arranged a wedding for the two of them. Of course, Ling Han was also a celebrity now. Who didn't know that he was freakish? While being at third tier, he could already fight Xian Chihu, who was a fourth tier, and his future prospects were limitless. Thus, when they learned that he was going to marry off his daughter, the people who came to offer their congratulations came in waves. On the day of Ling Shi's wedding, there were as many guests as there were clouds in the skies. Miss Lin, I didn't expect you to give me face." Ling Han was surprised because even Lin Yulian had come. It wasn't Ling Han's wedding, so Lin Yulian had given him enough face by deigning to attend. Lin Yulian only smiled and nodded. She had never been competitive or angry. She was actually very similar to Ling Shi. When the auspicious time arrived, everyone came to the hall, ready to witness the most important moment in the couple's lives. Woo! At this moment, an ancient and melodious horn sounded, startling everyone. "The Hysteria army is attacking!" someone suddenly shouted. In an instant, Everyone was in an uproar. This day had finally arrived. Lin Yulian immediately displayed her calm side as the commander-in-chief and said, "Everyone, go below the city wall immediately." "Understood." All the heavenly venerates obeyed and set off one after another. Ling Han also nodded at the people from the Ling Alliance. "Let's go." Everyone arrived at the city wall. Some were making preparations below, while others stood on the city wall and looked into the distance. The raging energy storm was about to disappear, and through the thin shroud remaining of the energy storm, one could see rows of Hysteria troops that were ready to attack. It was too easy to distinguish them, and it was extremely obvious that they had many heads and limbs. Their unique traits were extremely apparent. As long as the energy storm completely dissipated, this iron-blooded army would charge over. They had no mercy. Not only did they not care about the lives of their enemies, but they also did not care about the lives of their companions. Everyone's heart constricted. This was the most crucial battle. As long as they could withstand this wave of attacks, everything would be fine. However, if they couldn't, they might be defeated. The energy storm became weaker and weaker, and when there was only a tiny bit left, some irritable Hysteria troops became the first ones to rush out. However, after being sucked in and ground to nothing by the energy storm, even fifth tiers were instantly wiped out. One had to know that this was something only seventh tiers, who were indestructible and immortal, could withstand. However, after only a few breaths' time, the energy storm finally disappeared completely. Boom! The Hysteria army suddenly erupted with a terrifying whistling sound. Instantly, this army moved, charging towards them like an avalanche. "Attack!" Xian Chihu commanded, and several thousand heavenly venerates on the city wall attacked at the same time. Instantly, streaks of brilliance shot out, and even the sky lost its color, leaving only these attacks dancing wildly. Most of these were fifth tiers attacks. Although long-range attacks would be slightly weaker in terms of power, they were still very powerful. Boom! This wave of attacks fell, and the Hysteria's army collapsed in large numbers. These were all cannon fodder with cultivation level below the fifth tier. But those at the fifth tier were practically unharmed and were charging forward faster and faster. "Prepare for close combat," Wu Haoyang shouted. He took out a saber and floated in midair, casting down a golden light. When the Hysteria army rushed past the city wall and collided with this golden light, a large number of heavenly venerates were immediately destroyed. He was an elite with sixth-tier battle prowess, and here he was almost like a cheat. Lin Yulian and Xian Chihu also released their respective precious tools. Although their martial prowess was outstanding, they could not kill recklessly here. They had to prioritize the overall situation. Their most important mission was to minimize their own losses. Otherwise, Hysteria would have been able to continuously send out an army, and one more of their number dying would mean one less soldier. However, Ling Han did not have such scruples. He let out a long howl and took the initiative to attack. He channeled the heavenly venerable seals, drew his divine demon sword, and began a massacre. Pu, Piu, Piu. His battle prowess was now at the peak stage of the fifth tier, and those who had not reached fifth tier were absolutely not Ling Han's match, and were not able to withstand a single blow from him. Streaks of ink-black blood splashed out, and the Hysteria's troops that died in his hands instantly exceeded 100. However, Ling Han was surprised to discover that he had not absorbed the slightest bit of life essence. The Hysteria's troops weren't considered as lives. He recalled that he hadn't been able to absorb any life essence after killing Meng Dong's group, either. It seemed that this was a special characteristic of Hysteria they could only absorb and not release. Previously, when Xiao Ying and Ba Duo died, their life essence would overflow because they were indeed human at that time. However, after Meng Dong and the others fused together, it was different. It was as if they had summoned a portion of Hysteria. It was completely a characteristic of Hysteria. This made Ling Han very disappointed. He had originally thought that given that the realm battlefield had reopened, he could use this to quickly increase his cultivation level. He had not expected that killing the Hysteria army was basically meaningless. He roared loudly and channeled the first-grade Heavenly Venerable Seal, stimulating his battle prowess to an even more terrifying level as he unleashed a merciless massacre. The number of Hysteria troops was astonishing, but there was also a flaw. None of them had mastered Heavenly Venerable Seals. One could imagine how difficult it was to bestow Heavenly Venerable Seals on others. One could only sever them from oneself. Even Hysteria, as a dimension itself, should be greatly restricted. In this way, within the 5th tier's ranks, the Hysteria troops that could suppress Ling Han didn't exist at all, allowing him to charge about recklessly. However, he only had 5th tier battle prowess after all, facing a battle prowess of hundreds of thousands of enemies of the same level. Even Ling Han would not be able to withstand it. Under the fierce and violent bombardment of the enemy, he got injured swiftly and had no choice but to retreat behind the city wall to catch his breath. This was definitely not a quick battle that could be ended swiftly, so he could not be too anxious. What if he encountered danger after he has revealed all his trump cards at once? Lin Yulian and the other two were in charge. They were incomparably powerful and were completely focused on defense. Naturally, they formed an insurmountable barrier and guarded firmly. If anyone encountered danger, they would immediately make a move to render assistance. Without these 3 people, the casualties of Ling Han and the others would have increased by more than tenfold. If anyone could not hold on any longer, they would hide within the protection range of their 3 precious tools. The area covered by such a protection range was very small, but it formed an absolute defense. The Hysteria's army could not break through at all, because this was the might of the 6th tier. The Hysteria troops were endless, ranging from 9th heaven celestial kings to 5th tier heavenly venerates. The number of monsters at each cultivation level was also astonishingly large, and there were hundreds of thousands of monsters at the 5th tier. Compared to the Flaming Frost Realm's mere 1,000-odd people, they were suppressed by more than 100-fold in terms of quantity. This battle lasted for a full 3 months before the follow-up troops from Hysteria's side were finally sparse, and it was no longer as overwhelming as before. This was a great victory, but at the same time it was also a tragic victory. The number of heavenly venerates who had died in battle was as high as 10,000, although it was pitifully small compared to the number of Hysteria's combatants. How many heavenly venerates were there in the Flaming Frost Realm? Chapter 2910 2910 Decapitation Operation. Chapter 2910 2910 Decapitation Operation. 2910 Decapitation Operation. The battle ended, and the surviving heavenly venerates immediately started healing themselves. The next battle could break out at any time, and they had to ensure that they were in prime condition. Otherwise, it was possible that they would not be able to stay alive to continue fighting in the next battle after that. Merely 3 years later, Hysteria's troops made a comeback. However, this time was slightly different. Hysteria's army had actually set up camp for the first time and did not attack at the first instance. In the past, Hysteria's troops wouldn't have done this. They would attack the moment they appeared because they didn't have any intelligence. Their only thought was slaughter and battle. Hence, the fact that they had actually set up camp as if they were going to have a long-term standoff against the Flaming Frost army was unfathomable to everyone. When Hysteria created its monsters, it would only have standards in terms of number and battle prowess. It would not bestow them with corresponding intelligence. Because with intelligence, there would be many disadvantages, such as fear of death or thoughts of betrayal, like those surviving dregs of Hysteria that had been trapped in the past. It had been too long, and they had developed self-intelligence. They had actually betrayed Hysteria. For Hysteria, freedom of will was a type of poison. To avoid trouble, it directly skipped over the aspect of intelligence. In any case, its creations were simple. Even if 100 heavenly venerates had to be sacrificed in exchange for one Flaming Frost Realm elite, it would still be worth it. Of course, it could also strengthen its control while bestowing intelligence, but this would greatly increase the difficulty of creation. The number of troops it could create at the same time could possibly decrease by 100 or even 1,000 times. Thus, the fact that Hysteria's army didn't possess intelligence was also due to compromising in exchange for ease of creation. But now these Hysteria troops actually knew to set up camp, which naturally made everyone feel very curious and even feel a chill. If these troops had really developed intelligence, then added with the overwhelming numbers, just what kind of terrifying battle prowess would they unleash? Just the thought of it was enough to make one shudder. The Hysteria army did not attack, and the Flaming Frost army naturally would not take the initiative to attack either. If they lost the defense of the city wall, they would lose their greatest advantage. That would really be too dangerous. This situation continued for several thousands of years, and the Hysteria troops finally unleashed a new wave of assault. Of course, it was not as strong as the last time. After all, these were troops that had been accumulating for hundreds of billions of years, so how could they possibly gather such terrifying numbers again in a short several thousand years? But this time, Hysteria's army actually turned into over 100 separate troops, each led by a monster, and launched an attack on the city defense. Everyone could clearly see that though those leading monsters also looked too horrible to look at, their eyes were filled with the light of intelligence. They finally understood that the majority of Hysteria's troops were still simple-minded and only knew how to fight and kill. However, Hysteria had bestowed considerable intelligence on these leading monsters. The leaders were heavenly venerates, and once they had been bestowed with intelligence, they should be able to improve endlessly. It was unknown whether they would betray Hysteria one day, but for the present, they were definitely not so easily dealt with. They only needed to command reasonably, and that was enough to increase the overall strength of the Hysteria troops by a large margin. This battle was very arduous. The city wall was conquered, conquered, and then regained in an endless tug of war. It was clear that the military strength this time was far lower, but they had still fought for more than half a year before finally eliminating all Hysteria's troops, and the price paid by the Flaming Frost army was naturally even greater. The only fortunate thing was that the heavenly venerates that had died in battle on their side were mostly first tier or second tier heavenly venerates. Their main battle prowess hadn't suffered too many losses, but they would suffer heavy losses in the subsequent battles. What fourth tier or fifth tier had not cultivated all the way from first tier and second tier? The short period of peace only lasted for 7 years, and Hysteria's army appeared again. This time, they still set up camp outside the city, clearly planning to do it again. This caused all the heavenly venerates to shiver, thinking that the enemy definitely could not be allowed to accumulate troops like this. Otherwise, the losses would be too terrifying. Lin Yulian and the others also gathered the fifth-tier elites to discuss how to deal with this new Hysteria army. Though Ling Han was only a third tier, his battle prowess was at the fifth tier, so he was naturally invited as well. Everyone came up with ideas and suggestions. No matter how great their past conflicts were, when it came to dealing with Hysteria, they had to be united. There was naturally no one who did not understand this logic. Some advocated taking the initiative to attack, so they would not give Hysteria's army time to accumulate troops, while others advocated carrying out a decapitation operation. As long as those intelligent leaders were killed, Hysteria's army would return to its original state, which was not much different from before. If they took the initiative to attack, they would lose the protection of the city's defenses. So even if they could win, it would be a narrow victory and would not be worth it at all. A decapitation operation. This was possible, but how was one supposed to sneak into the enemy camp without a sound and kill a considerable number of leaders that were at the heavenly venerable tier? Would Xian Chihu and the other two with sixth-tier battle prowess undertake this mission? The problem was that sixth tiers were not gods in front of fifth tiers, either. There were at least tens of thousands of fifth tiers in Hysteria's army, and if one was besieged by these elites, even a sixth tier would be ganged up on and killed. These three people were too important. Who would dare have them take the risk? Then, if these three people could not be mobilized, who would be sent to carry out this mission? "I suggest that Ling Han goes," Exenchihu suddenly said. Though Ling Han is only a third tier, his battle prowess can practically sweep aside all fifth tiers. He is the most suitable candidate to complete this mission. Lin Yulian was just about to object when she saw that a great many fifth-tier elites were already nodding slowly. Some people really thought that Ling Han was suitable for this mission, while others hoped that he would die. For example, Nalin Xiong, whose younger brother was killed by Ling Han, and Qi Xian, whose ally Fei Wu had been killed by Ling Han. Let's vote. Those who think that Ling Han should go, please raise your hands. Exenchihu did not give Lin Yulian the chance to speak at all, and directly proceeded to the stage where everyone would be voting. More than half of the people raised their hands, directly bringing this matter to a final conclusion. Ling Han, I'll hand this mission to you. You are in charge of selecting teammates. Quality is more important than quantity. At most, there can only be 10 of you. Otherwise, there is no need to draw near at all, as you guys will be discovered before that, Exenchihu said seriously. He seemed to be supporting Ling Han, but this was a mission that was similar to suicide. Who would be willing to go with Ling Han? It should be known that if one wanted to return to the enemy camp, one would have to have fifth-tier battle prowess at the very least. Then, now that all those with battle prowess of the fifth tier were here, they were very clear that this mission was extremely difficult. Who would be so foolish as to go with Ling Han? And if Ling Han refused, that Exenchihu might flip out and use the excuse that Ling Han did not obey military command to kill him. This was the battlefield, and the greatest taboo was not obeying military command of a senior officer. Ling Han looked at Exenchihu in surprise. He hadn't realized this before. How could this guy be so vicious? Don't waste time. Otherwise, there will be more and more Hysteria's troops, and it will be even more impossible for us to succeed. Exenchihu smiled and looked at Ling Han. In 3 days, select the members of your small team. You must set out then. Chapter 2911. 2911 Pressing a Handprint. Chapter 2911. 2911 Pressing a Handprint. 2911 Pressing a Handprint. No refusal was allowed. No argument was allowed. Exenchihu brought out his authority as the commander-in-chief and directly gave Ling Han a mission that could be said to be extremely dangerous. He looked at Ling Han with a calm smile, a hint of arrogance at the corners of his lips. This was telling Ling Han that he had clearly and truly done it on purpose. If Ling Han had the ability, he could go bite him. If he couldn't, he could only submit and accept. At this moment, Ling Han genuinely wanted to wash his hands of this matter. Fuck, he had come to fight against Hysteria's troops, not to be bullied, and definitely not to be screwed over. However, he quickly suppressed this thought. Exenchihu could use his public office to avenge a personal grudge, but Ling Han could not be impulsive and rash. It could be said that if there was anyone in this world that could truly solve the great problem of hysteria, it would definitely be him. Though Ling Han was presently unable to absorb the life essence of Hysteria's troops that had died in battle, his cultivation level still increased faster than while cultivating in seclusion during the intense battle because he was a battle maniac. Nurturing himself through battle was the fastest way for him to improve himself. In this place, his cultivation speed was the fastest, and no one knew how much time was left for them. Hysteria's trump cards came one after another. Even 7th-tier elites could only barely hold back its main body and could not free themselves at all. It was needless to say who was better and who was worse. Ling Han had to advance his cultivation level as soon as possible and reach the 6th tier or even the 7th tier. That way, even if the powers of dimension in his body hadn't reached great accomplishment level yet, a 7th tier him would still be undying and indestructible. At the very least, being a 7th tier would give him unlimited possibilities. Hence, Ling Han swallowed his anger, his eyes making direct contact with Xian Chihu. This bastard, he called himself the greatest prodigy of all eternity, yet used public office to avenge a private grudge. When Ling Han advanced to the 4th tier, or 5th tier, he would definitely thrash this bastard. So what if Xian Chihu had a 7th tier elite backing him? Ling Han would definitely kill him. Go on. Xian Chihu flicked his hand, looking like he was shooing someone away. Ling Han and the others did not say anything. They merely turned around and left. Not long after, Lin Yulian walked over. Ling Han, do you blame me? She asked apologetically. Ling Han shook his head. This has nothing to do with you. However, Lin Yulian said, in this expedition, my brother warned me to prioritize Xian Chihu in all matters. If he makes a decision, I can't disobey him. There was such a thing. Ling Han was surprised. Lin Xiaoyang should be aware of the conflict between him and Xian Chihu, right? Why would he deliberately add a restrictive curse on Lin Yulian to deter her from doing anything? Had Lin Xiaoyang not foreseen that Xian Chihu would be so short-sighted, using public office to avenge a private grudge, or did he have another motive? Ling Han thought for a while, and then immediately shook his head. There was definitely no problem with Lin Xiaoyang. A mission is a mission, but completing it is another matter, Lin Yulian said. No one has made it a rule that a mission must be successful, especially for such a large mission. Do you understand? Ling Han nodded. What Lin Yulian meant was that he only needed to go through the motions for this decapitation mission, and penetrating deep into the enemy camp was practically an action of suicide. However, Ling Han was unafraid because he could traverse the Genesis world. With his present strength, even the realm battlefield wouldn't be able to stop him from traversing freely. Thus, there was absolutely no problem for him to ensure his own safety. That was also the reason why he had not turned and flipped out on the spot. Ling Han wanted to see what kind of expression Xian Chihu's face would show when he returned with the corpses of the leaders of the enemy troops. Lin Yulian left very quickly. She was one of the commanders-in-chief, and now there were a great many matters that she had to deal with. Ling Han, someone called out from outside his stone house. Ling Han walked out to take a look, only to see that it was an unfamiliar 5th-tier elite. Nalin Xiong. This elite introduced himself, a dangerous glint flashing in his eyes. Realization instantly dawned on Ling Han. This was Nalin's older brother. Had he come to avenge his brother's death? You want to register with me and participate in the decapitation mission. Ling Han was all smiles. Brother Nalin really has the whole world in your considerations. I am impressed. Come. Let us make history together so that future generations will remember Brother Nalin forever. Fuck! Nalin Xiong was dumbfounded. He had come to watch Ling Han make a fool of himself and take advantage of the opportunity to ridicule him. That was because whether Ling Han acted on impulse and really went to the enemy camp or disobeyed orders, both would have terrible consequences for Ling Han. But Ling Han actually wanted to pull him into the decapitation mission. Creating a history together might guess. That would be seeking death. Furthermore, just listen to what Ling Han said. Nalin Xiong was the only one who would be remembered. In other words, he would die in battle. Why aren't you the one who will be dying? Nalin Xiong had heard of Ling Han's toxic tongue, but he had not thought that it could be toxic to this extent. Merely a few simple words were enough to make him feel stifled. Come, give me your handprint, and you'll be one of the members of my death squad. No decapitation mission. Ling Han retrieved a piece of paper and stretched out his hand to grab Nalin Xiong, making him place his handprint on the paper. Fuck your sister. Nalin Xiong hadn't gotten his breath back from his earlier anger, so he hurriedly dodged, saying, Ling Han, don't pester me endlessly. What's there to be modest about? Being able to contribute to the Genesis world is a great merit, and future generations will definitely remember your sacrifice, Ling Han said with a smile. He forcefully pulled Nalanxiong's hand. With how strong he was, Nalanxiong was really unable to break free. Nalanxiong's face had already turned green. If this handprint was really placed, then wouldn't he be unable to explain himself? Even if he wanted to participate in the decapitation mission, there was actually no need for him to leave a handprint and register himself. Now that they were all heavenly venerates, no oath would be able to restrain them. However, this was embarrassing after all. In the future, when people spoke of this matter, they would say that Nalanxiong had even pressed down his handprint, yet fled during the battle and whatnot. No one would care about the truth. They would only comprehend according to their own logic. Nalanxiong resisted with all his might, but Ling Han was extraordinarily powerful. Though the former was close to the late stage of the 5th tier, he really wasn't much stronger than Ling Han. The two of them pulled and struggled with each other, as if they were like street thugs brawling in the street. Nalanxiong's expression became livid. He roared loudly, and a seal lit up. Instantly, his power soared explosively. Ling Han laughed loudly and channeled a seal as well. Not only did his power increase greatly, he also easily suppressed Nalanxiong. His hand that was holding on to Nalanxiong's hand forcefully pressed his handprint on the paper. Ling Han, have you had enough? Nalanxiong roared in fury. Yet Ling Han said to himself, "Io, there's no ink on it. Let's do it again." He then drew a line on Nalanxiong's palm with his finger. Instantly, blood gushed out. Since there's so much blood, no point wasting it. Just make a palm print. Pa! He forcefully pressed Nalanxiong's entire hand onto the paper. Damn it! Nalanxiong roared loudly and power gushed out. Pa! This piece of paper immediately turned into scraps. He finally broke free from Ling Han's control, his eyes spitting fire as he looked at Ling Han, wanting nothing more than to swallow him whole and skin him alive. He had come to watch Ling Han make a fool of himself and take advantage of the opportunity to mock and ridicule him. How had it become him being harshly made fun of by Ling Han? Ling Han shook his head and sighed. You are not even participating in such a great undertaking. Nalanxiong, I look down on you. Chapter 2912. 2912 Volunteer. Chapter 2912. 2912 Volunteer. 2912 Volunteer. You've played a cruel trick on me, yet you're still looking down on me. If Nalanxiong possessed enough strength, he would definitely move to kill Ling Han. He couldn't bear this anger. If you're not here to register yourself, what have you come for? Ling Han sat down, crossing one leg over the other. Nalanxiong wanted to say that he had come to laugh at Ling Han, but after what had just happened, how could he say such words? He was the real joke here, okay? Ling Han, I really want to see how you will come back alive, he said balefully. You don't have to worry about that. Ling Han waved his hand dismissively. I am completely unrelated to you, so it won't be good for you to stick close to me like this. Those who know will naturally understand that you are trying to curry favor with me, and those who don't know will think that there is a problem with your sexual orientation in some aspect. This, Nalanxiong was once again dumbfounded. This was too vicious, wasn't it? He really wanted to vomit blood. Humph, you can only talk tough now. I really want to see who'll join a team of certain death, like yours. He regained his composure. After all, he was a heavenly venerate. Ling Han chuckled. Are you worrying for nothing again? Nalanxiong took a few steps back, and then sat down cross-legged at a corner of the city wall. In any case, there was only 3 days' time. He wanted to see how disappointed Ling Han would look. No one would be stupid enough to go with Ling Han. Actually, it was not difficult for Ling Han to find someone to go with him. The Empress, Hunyo, the Rain Emperor, and the others would definitely agree to his request without a second word. But how could Ling Han possibly allow them to take such risks? Moreover, without battle prowess of the 5th tier, they wouldn't be of much use even if they did go. It was still better for Ling Han to go alone. When he saw that something was off, he could immediately flee, and could come and go as he pleased. 1 day, 2 days, and 3 days' time soon passed, yet not a single person took the initiative to look for Ling Han, wanting to join this decapitation mission. This was naturally within Ling Han's expectations. He was completely unconcerned. The cold smile on Nailan Xiong's face became wider and wider. He wanted even more to see how Ling Han would begrudgingly go out to battle alone tomorrow. That would make him feel even more pleased. However, right at this moment, a person walked over from a distance. When he arrived in front of Ling Han's stone house, he stopped and said to Nailan Xiong, "Is this the manner of Ling Han, brother Ling?" "Fuck, do you think I'm a doorman?" Nailan Xiong's expression immediately became very ugly. Nailan Xiong felt an urge to beat someone up again, but he didn't make a move. It was not that he did not want to, but rather that the other was also a 5th tier. This was Fu Yuan, and it should only be tens of billions of years since he advanced into 5th tier, but his momentum was extremely shocking, and it was extremely possible that his strength was not inferior to Nailan Xiong's. Moreover, he hadn't said anything insulting. If Nailan Xiong made a move rashly, it would definitely be his fault in the end, and he might be pressured into apologizing to him instead. Nailan Xiong humphed, and acted as if he had not heard. "Looking for me?" Ling Han pushed open the doors and walked out. Fu Yuan smiled faintly and said, "Brother Ling, I'm Fu Yuan, and I've come to ask if there's any room left in this decapitation squad." Nailan Xiong couldn't help but look surprised. Judging from the tone of this person, it seemed like he wanted to join the decapitation operation. Hiss! Has your head been kicked by a donkey? Even if he was tired of living, there was no need for him to use this kind of method to commit suicide, right? Not even a complete corpse would be left behind. Ling Han also faltered slightly and then said, "There is room. Could it be that Brother Fu wants to join?" Fu Yuan smiled slightly and said, "That will depend on whether Brother Ling is willing to take me." Ling Han smiled and said, "Brother Fu, don't you know that this mission is extremely dangerous and fraught with danger?" Fu Yuan laughed loudly. If that was not the case, wouldn't it be boring? Ling Han's eyes lit up. This answer surprised him slightly, but also gave rise to a feeling of appreciation of someone who shared the same principles. If Brother Fu does not fear death, then there is indeed room left for Brother Fu, he said. All right. Fu Yuan nodded and sat down at one side. Nailan Xiong was extremely surprised. At first, he had thought that there would definitely be no one that would be going with Ling Han, but now Fu Yuan's appearance caused his jaw to drop. Fu Yuan was a 5th tier heavenly venerate and not some young brat. This was not a decision made in the heat of the moment. Is Brother Nailan going as well? Fu Yuan looked towards him. Nailan Xiong hurriedly waved his hands. He didn't want to be morally kidnapped. Then what is the meaning of Brother Nailan being here? Fu Yuan's expression was filled with confusion. Ling Han laughed loudly. I also want to know that myself. Nailan Xiong's face involuntarily flushed red when he saw the two of them mock him together. Come to think of it, they were making sacrifices here, and it was one thing for him not to support them, but he actually came to see them make a fool of themselves. What was he doing? He naturally also treasured his pride as well. He immediately stood up in anger and ran off. Ling Han and Fu Yuan exchanged a glance, both laughing loudly. Brother Fu, do you know that the mission this time is extremely dangerous? Ling Han asked seriously. Fu Yuan nodded. I have encountered a bottleneck in my cultivation and need to experience life and death to help me break through. All right, then we'll support each other, Ling Han said. With the help of a fifth-tier elite, he had more confidence. The two of them waited for a while, and the third day finally ended. However, no other person came over to register to participate in this mission. This was also within Ling Han's expectations. In truth, Fu Yuan's participation was already very surprising to him. Let's go. Ling Han left behind the celestial guest residence. Even if he could traverse freely in the void, he had already become hostile with Hysteria. What if Hysteria just happened to catch him? Even if Hysteria could not use the power of its main body, one would still need sixth-tier power to resist a doppelganger. At the very least, Ling Han had to take another step further, and only then would he be able to truly roam freely. The team of two exited from the city wall, retracted their auras, and headed towards the enemy camp. Though Hysteria's troops were stationed 10,000 miles away, what was this bit of distance worth to Heavenly Venerates? After only a short while, the two of them arrived outside the camp. They shook their bodies slightly and changed their form, becoming more or less like Hysteria's troops. In any case, it was fine as long as they had many hands and feet and looked extremely ugly. Then it was their aura which became cold and sinister. They could not imitate the aura of fifth-tier monsters, but there was no problem with fourth-tier and third-tier. Of course, this could only fool the enemy for a while. If they were carefully probed, they would not be able to hide at all. The two of them swaggered into Hysteria's encampment just like that. Most of the monsters here were brainless killing tools, and now they were resting under orders. The whole encampment was dead silent, as if it was a cemetery. This was very bizarre. This was clearly a camp that had hundreds of thousands of troops, yet it was this silent. Where do we start looking? Fu Yuan communicated through divine sense. Though they had disguised themselves as Hysteria's troops, all the people were resting, and only they were moving around. This was too obvious. Although this was a base camp, Hysteria's troops didn't need tents and the like. The entire army was seated on the ground, like stone statues. All of them had their eyes closed, and though they all looked different, they felt more or less the same. How were they supposed to find their leader? Those that had been bestowed with intelligence would definitely be slightly different, Ling Han thought. He pulled Fu Yuan with him and sat down as well. Then he released his divine sense and began his search.